We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's that football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team. I would be very careful about slinging stones. Am I going to get sued?
Is that legal on this?
I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We are live here on YouTube, God willing, because Google was down for a minute there, wasn't it?
YouTube and Gmail appear to be having some problems. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're live, and it's a great Monday morning. It's NFL Scouting Combine week. We're off to Indy this week.
Yep.
And a little extra pep in my voice, at least for now, until I bring it down. A notch.
Uh-huh. You're heading away to Indy in the largest car ever made by man.
Yeah, I rented a Suburban.
Yeah.
For the trip because I need a one-way because I'm going to Sloan this week. I'll also be speaking at Sloan, the Sloan Analytics Conference. I wonder. Somebody needs to research this. Am I the only person to be a keynote speaker at both the Cool Clinic for offensive line coaches and also the Sloan Analytics Conference?
Maybe.
Well-rounded here.
You are joining together the football people and the nerds.
That's right. I can do both.
Single-handedly.
I'm like a chameleon.
You should bring your picture, of just the offensive line guys and then your face or the logo.
We could do the meme with the arm wrestling meme where it's like people are coming together. It's me. Let's get meme guy on here, bringing together the O-line community and the nerds. That's what I'm doing here.
The arm wrestling meme.
Yeah, that one.
You at least know where that's
arm
from,
wrestling,
right?
handshake thing, whatever it is.
You don't know where that's from?
What is that from?
That's from Predator.
Okay,
when
yeah.
Arnie meets whoever Carl
That's
Weathers
right,
is
that's
playing,
right.
whatever that guy's name was.
So we're going to get that going. Just letting the people get here.
Imagine the pressure, by the way, on Carl Weathers. Like when somebody described that scene to him, it's like, hey, I know you're in pretty good shape already being a former football player, and
Yeah.
But you're going to have to do this with Arnie, Mr. Universe. So you might want to spend the next 4 months doing curls.
Yeah, maybe get jacked.
Right.
So anyway, here we go. It's the fourth of our 4-part series, fixing every team in the NFL. We're 3/4 of the way through. Today it's going to be the AFC South and the NFC South as well. So we've got the charity drives done. When am I rugbying, by the way?
Still TBD. I still need the videos from the guy that's currently involved in the Six Nations. So.
Is there a game this weekend?
No.
A match?
They got some free time
pitch?
now, but I've already sent like a sort of reminder / begging email, and there's only so many of those you can send before you feel like an absolute loser.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of hoping he gets back to me at some point now with a free week.
Got it. All right. Well, soon we'll be doing some rugby. All right. So as we've said before, we're fixing every team in 5 minutes. It usually takes 15 to 25 minutes. We'll give you guys some ideas, some thoughts on your team, some potential strategies to employ this offseason. So let's do it. Starting in the AFC South with the Houston Texans. Got 2 first-round picks again in Houston with the Deshaun Watson trade. And pick number 2 overall, not pick number 1, but pick number 2 overall. Where are we going to start here with the Houston Texans? Let me see what else they have here. Sorry, free agency-wise. I usually do a little reset. Another one of those teams where on paper, only 2 free agents on defense and only 2 on offense. And not really big names. The biggest name is Obo Okoronkwo.
Yeah. And they have the most draft capital of any team in the NFL by a pretty big distance.
This is what they've been waiting for, right? We've sat here doing this exercise the last couple of years, and we've suggested that when they go to free agency, find some younger-ish players that could be a part of the long-term deals. They haven't. They've gotten 1- and 2-year contracts, but now they can completely rebuild from the draft here.
So the first decision to make, I think, is do you try and undo the damage done by winning that game and taking yourself out of the number 1 overall pick and trade with Chicago? The Adam Schefter is reporting today the self-evident fact that Chicago is happy to listen to offers for that number 1 overall pick.
A shocking turn of events.
So, you either sit there at 2 and get a quarterback, or you trade up to number 1 and guarantee the one you want. Because otherwise, and in particular, the Texans, because one of the most likely teams to trade to number 1, if it isn't them, is Indianapolis within the division. So do you have enough faith that Indianapolis is not interested in the guy you're interested in, and are you prepared to wait till number 2 for your guy?
Yeah, so you mentioned all the draft capital. The Texans have 5 picks in the top 73 and 6 in the top 104. So a lot of significant picks, 12 total picks. They have number 2 and number 12 in the first round. I think you might grab a couple of those picks and just go up to number 1, if you just to ensure that you get your guy. The other thing too is, if you don't love all of them, what if you took 2? You don't have to give up a ton to get up to 1, and then you held the cards and started listening to trade offers, including from the division rival Colts, and including the Panthers and the Raiders and anyone else that might want to trade up. What if you decided to do that as the Texans?
If you trade up to
1 and then put 1 on the market again.
It's unlikely you're going to get back more than what you gave up to go up to number 1. Otherwise,
sure it is, because the Bears aren't dropping as far, so you don't have to give up as much to get to 1. Say the Bears, you might give up pick 65, right? Like early third, or even if it was 33, even if it was like your best second round pick, you give up 33 to move up 1 spot. That's pretty steep. But say you just give up your third round pick, you can get more in return to go from 1 back to 4, 7, or 9. I don't know. What's the going rate from 2 to 1? Is it that significant?
I don't know, but it's probably going to cost you a decent amount, and I don't.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Chicago is unlikely to take a worse deal just to stay within the top 4, I would say.
All right, go get a quarterback.
Particularly, by the way, if Indianapolis is one of the other offers, because even then,
they might go crazy.
The difference between 2 and 4 for Chicago is effectively negligible. The difference between 2, 4, and then maybe 7 or 9 is a different conversation. But if Indy is one of the other teams available, which, by the way, you're unlikely to trade with because, you're in the division. So,
yeah,
I generally think from start to finish, your idea is bad.
Okay. Trade up for 1. Get the quarterback. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I was just talking through it on air like anyone else would.
It's fine. There are no dumb ideas until there are.
You lay off, man.
So, who's your quarterback? Bryce Young?
Bryce Young. I'll go Bryce.
Okay.
So we're getting Bryce Young. He's our quarterback. What else do we have to do here with the rest of our draft capital? And
we have an inside source now with the Houston Texans, and he was useless when it came to talking about
I thought you were
going to
break something.
No.
Yeah.
When it came to talking about which quarterback they were going to get, utterly useless.
Don't get Bobby fired.
PFF_Bobby had no information for us whatsoever.
Per usual. Seems to be the trend here. He won't let us break news. Won't give us any information on which quarterback he likes.
No.
Won't go out on a limb about anything.
Yeah.
Texans have a lot of cap space as well. So is this finally the time? Who's their biggest free agent signing over the last 2 years?
They haven't had any. It's probably Obo again.
One person has to be the biggest. Obo Okoronkwo at $3.5 million.
Right.
So are they going to tap into free agency a little bit here? It's like they're potentially returning all starting offensive linemen, but there's some improvement to be made there. As with every team, playmakers. Let's get some receivers in here. By the way, I love pushing Davis Mills down to backup. I like Davis Mills as a backup here.
It is interesting though that you would imagine that they would be in a similar position to to Chicago in terms of cap space. They've had a couple of years to get their house in order so that when they finally get rid of Deshaun Watson, they can spend and build around whoever the new guy is going to be. And they've got money, but they don't have Bears money, they've got 26 million of effective cap space right now, which is less than a third of what Chicago has, having torn the entire roster down and sort of designed around this year. And even Atlanta, it's half of what they have, having got rid of Matt Ryan, having taken the really punishing dead cap hit, and then look towards this season to start really rebuilding. vaguely surprising how little room the Texans actually have when you consider how long they've had sort of line of sight of this.
Now, as we've suggested with every other team, second wave of free agency is probably the best place to live here. But the Texans are one of those teams, I think, where you want to be aggressive and, make some bigger splash type of plays.
Well, what do they want? Because so they're not going to be massive spenders in free agency. They're going to be, picking up a few of those second wave guys, maybe in the first wave of timing. But they're not going to go out there and make 3 or 4 massive splash moves to try and move this roster. So they're going to be doing this largely through the draft. They've got the most draft capital of anybody, even if they spend a little bit to get up to number 1. You draft Bryce Young. He's your quarterback. Now what do you do?
So I think if you have D'Amico Ryans coming in, and I wonder how much you try to, it's not always replicate, but what you're comfortable with, what you are comfortable with, or what he's had in San Francisco is a really good defensive line. Maybe they bring Charles Omenihu back, right, who just had a lot of success with D'Amico Ryans, started his career with the Texans. I think Omenihu could be a free agent that you bring in, but I think you're trying to load up on the defensive line on that side of the ball at least. And then we'll only come back to receiver and tight end. But on the defensive side, Derek Stingley didn't have the best rookie season, but still have faith in him. Steven Nelson, a good solid veteran on the other side, had a solid season. And Desmond King has become solid veteran. I mean, that secondary could be pretty good. And D'Amico Ryans has gotten the most out of his cornerback group over the last couple of years with the Niners. Jalen Petrie, if he could just tackle better, which is a big if, but that tends to revert back to the mean. He had, 24, 25 missed tackles last year as a rookie safety. On paper, I think they could have a decent secondary. I think this offseason, try to bring back Okoronkwo cheap. Maybe you bring in an Omenihu, and you need some sort of alpha defensive lineman there. Maybe that's somebody at 12 that you're looking at. But yeah, I think they're loading up in the trenches on that side, and then looking at perimeter players to complement Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like if you're going to get the quarterback, particularly if it's going to be Bryce Young, and the one concern you have about him is unprecedented size or Doug Flutie size, you have to do as much as humanly possible to make sure he's got things to work with. So receivers and offensive linemen.
Yeah.
Laramie Tunsil was one of the best pass-blocking left tackles in the NFL last year, but this offensive line for a while has kind of been Laramie Tunsil and other people. Kenyon Green, their first-round pick from a year ago, was rough year one. Rough, I mean, in his defense, going up against a pretty ugly slate of really, really good interior defensive linemen almost on a weekly basis. But, that's the NFL these days. So either he needs to take a massive step forward or they're going to need to keep firing at that offensive line. Brandon Cooks is their one top-end receiver who might end up getting traded away. If you're trading away Brandon Cooks, you're going to need to replace him with something, because after that it's Nico Collins, who's a nice role player but hasn't really suggested that he can step into a Brandon Cooks kind of void. John Mechie, who obviously was dealing with his cancer. Is that what he had?
Yes.
I don't know what his status actually is heading into this year, but probably not something you can rely on. So they might end up spending their second number one pick, number 12, on a wide receiver for Bryce Young.
Was that McShay? That was McShay's mock, where they went, I think, Bryce Young and then Quentin Johnston. They went quarterback and then receiver.
Yeah.
And we had some sort of Elias stat.
Right. First time since whenever that somebody is.
First time since Tebow and Demaryius Thomas.
Oh, okay.
That a team drafted a quarterback and a receiver in the first round for each other. Again, I feel like I don't love Quentin Johnston. I know there's a lot of people that do. I'm okay to, say there's a chance he could be good, and I'm going to rewatch him and have, maybe change my feelings on him. Who knows? But a big-bodied receiver who's not great at the catch point for his size, but does have good speed. We'll see if he runs this week, and if that ends up changing things. If he runs in the 4.4s at 6'4" or something like that. But Quentin Johnston's the number one receiver on our draft board. There's a bit of a drop before Jordan Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba. But if we're talking at 12, Johnston absolutely could be available there.
Yeah.
And then you add that to Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins, and that looks good.
I also think, Jordan Addison, reminds me a lot of Garrett Wilson in terms of just being good at everything. And
Yeah.
because of that, those guys tend to get overlooked or knocked a little bit because everybody's looking for the next Jamar Chase, and you're going to see multiple people telling you there's no Jamar Chase in this draft class, as if that's a realistic standard. But if you're looking for a Jamar Chase, Johnson is the guy that you look at and say, all right, he's big, he's fast, like he has the ceiling maybe that can become that guy. Because guys like Garrett Wilson or Addison don't necessarily have that ceiling, it's like, oh, well, we got to drop those guys a little bit. But if he's just good at everything, that's worth it. That's worth 12 overall. And Garrett Wilson was worth, when did he go, 10 overall? Those guys that are just impactful, good playmakers that can run after the catch, that can get open, that can separate deep at all levels, draft those guys. Like, they're good players. The fact that they can't necessarily become Jamar Chase should not be a reason to not draft them, A, as the first receiver in the draft, but B, as high as number 12 overall.
You want to give him Addison?
I think that wouldn't be a bad move.
All right. I can accept that. We're working together here. We have Bryce Young and Jordan Addison. Let's go crazy here. What about on the turn? I don't know if this is available, if this is a possibility, but Dalton Kincaid, the tight end out of Utah, that is jumping Michael Mayer in a lot of rankings here. Kincaid, about 240 pounds, more of an H-back type of body, but add him to this offense. He might be there at 32. I don't know if he'll be that first-round pick because of the size. He doesn't, like, Mayer looks like your traditional wide tight end. Those guys tend to be valued a little bit higher. Remember Cole Kmet going at 40 overall out of Notre Dame as well. So I'll say right now, I think Mayer goes over Kincaid. Kincaid may be on the turn at number 33 in the second round. Now you've got your big-bodied receiver and a really slick route running tight end, and Kincaid potentially as your second option here.
Yeah, or if you just keep, you double dip at wide receiver. What if two of your first three picks are wide receivers for?
Oh wait, you gave Addison. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, for your quarterback to play with.
So Zay Flowers, who we've mentioned for everybody, Tank Dell, Josh Downs. Those are the next guys on our board.
Yeah, and maybe people don't like or are scared away by Jackson Smith and Jigba's injury and the 40 time he ends up posting or doesn't post this pre-draft process. Maybe he ends up sliding as far as the top of the second.
If you are taking a forward-looking approach, though, Larry Tunsil at left tackle, center Justin Britt, right guard A.J. Cann, and right tackle Titus Howard. 4/5 of your offensive line are all heading into the last year of their respective contracts. I'm a big fan of right tackle prospect DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. He could be a nice early second round. He's my draft equivalent of Kelvin Beachum, I would say. If you're not going to get Kelvin Beachum for $1.5 million in free agency, you could draft DeJuan Jones late in the second round. So I think offensive line is another place that if they are taking a multi-year approach here, they might want to spend a couple picks there as well. So you want to double up on receivers. I actually might grab a DeJuan Jones here as well.
Yeah.
But do we go all offense, or is this another one of those, it's DeMeco Ryans, defensive coach, tries to put his stamp on the defense, and they actually go to that side of the ball?
I'm sure DeMeco Ryans would love some defenders, but it kind of feels like this should be, like this. Your number one priority is going to be, we now have a quarterback for the first time in a while. Let's make sure this guy succeeds, particularly if they've sort of gone out on a limb to trade up to number one to draft a guy, if it's Bryce Young, who is whatever his size is going to be, 5'10", 180. Like, that's a lot of kind of gamble to take and then go, but we're going to give you one receiver and then you got to figure it out from there, son. You know what I mean? You give that guy some help and give him as much help as you can. You have a huge amount of draft picks. You can still get defense in a little while, but let's make sure we're giving this guy as much help as we can.
I'm going to propose one more thing, but let's say high level, here's our Texan strategy. Let's get young on offense, not only Bryce, but also age-wise. Let's get younger on offense. That's where we're going to spend our draft capital, and let's use the last couple of years of Texans free agent strategy on defense. Stitch it together defensively for year one here. Trust DeMeco, coaching at X's and O's, coaching at a schematic advantage.
Right.
Here's one other thing I might propose here. For this, your connections with the 49ers, right? The Niners, we talked on the last show about all the stars that they need to re-sign. Could you trade for a Brandon Ayuk with the Niners?
Yeah.
Are the Niners going to get to a point where they can't pay everybody? Debo and Kittle and Bosa and everybody, all the stars there, McCaffrey. Maybe call the old friends, John Lynch, and flip some of that draft capital. They need draft capital. They've only got the 5 draft picks. I would take Brandon Ayuk. Is he good enough to be that 1 and then push Cooks to a 2 and Collins to a 3 and Mechie and Amari Rodgers and all those guys down a notch?
Well, I think they'd probably be trading away Brandon Cooks at that point, which whatever you're getting for Brandon Cooks can be a big part of what you're trading for Ayuk. I like that idea. I think that's a good one.
Good. Steve came up with a good idea.
Yeah, 1 for 1 or 1 and 1.
Finally. All right, so high level, we have a strategy for the Texans. You feel good about that?
Yeah. Trade up to number 1. Don't love that. We'll be annoyed, frustrated that I had to do that because we won a game for no reason. Get my guy, quarterback, give him some help, draft a wide receiver. I like drafting, so forget double dipping with those. Draft a wide receiver at 12, whichever your guy is there, and then trade for Brandon Ayuk. Now all of a sudden, you got Brandon Ayuk, you got whoever you drafted at 12, you got Nico Collins, Mechie if and when he comes back.
Trade Cooks, recoup some draft capital there.
Right. Then you can draft offensive line.
Then you can go DeJuan Jones, 2nd round.
Assuming you still have that pick.
True. Yeah, maybe not if you traded Ayuk. Probably don't have that anymore.
But you get something back for Cooks. That could be a 2nd. Like, who knows? We'll have to see what we're left with. But
yeah.
Offensive line.
Well, we're on the phone lines here.
Yeah.
We're talking to people. Mm-hmm. All right, there we go. Texans, fixed. The PFF NFL podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Well, Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. It is the last show of the week here in Western and Southern Studio in Cincinnati. Taking it to the road here this week. You got a bunch of, as of now, before they cancel on you, got some big name guests lined up for this week.
Yeah, so far there's some pretty heavy hitters when it comes to interviews we've got scheduled. So we will see what we actually end up getting.
That's the tease.
Yeah.
So like when you lock in an NFL head coach or GM for an hour, sometimes those hours disappear.
Yeah, never
during Combine week.
Never take that for granted.
All right, next up is the Indianapolis Colts, Sam. All we have to do is fix the Colts. So do we have to play this scenario that the Texans have traded up to 1, or can we say we're the Colts, would we trade up to 1? And what would we do? How would we do that? The Colts have pick number 4. Then they have their early second at pick 35. And it's 8 total draft picks for the Colts, 3 in the top 100, 4 in the top 106. So, mid-tier draft capital, maybe above average. I don't know if you've got that handy, but that's just at a glance. But this is all about the quarterback here.
Yeah.
What are we doing? What are we doing when we talk to Jim Irsay here during our meetings?
They are a touch above average when it comes to draft capital. I don't know that the Colts need to move. I think they can sit at 4 and get their guy. Because I don't know, there's something, I know Irsay has said, like, that kid from Alabama or whatever. I don't know that the Colts are really going to be interested in Bryce Young. I don't know why. For some reason, they strike me as a team that just isn't interested in the tiny quarterback.
I could absolutely see that. Yes.
Now maybe I'm just projecting. We've we've mocked Jim Irsay a little bit on this show, from the Madden, from whatever. Like, maybe I'm just projecting, and actually Bryce Young's the guy they have number 1 on their board by a mile. But every quarterback that's been added to this team since Ballard has been there has been like 6'4", 225. Almost the range is tiny. Now, admittedly, NFL quarterbacks as a general whole tend to skew to that kind of direction. So there's a confirmation bias there. But you would definitely say that he seems to have a type based on the quarterbacks that he's installed or brought in or whatever to that team. It's a huge departure to go from that to Bryce Young. And there are other options available. So I think that they might let Houston do what they're doing, jump up to 1, grab Bryce Young. At that point, Chicago's not taking a quarterback at 2. You're probably certain that Arizona's not taking the quarterback at 3. All you got to do is hope nobody jumps you into that 3 spot or 2 spot, and then you just draft your guy.
So who's our guy at 4?
I don't know. Who would you take it for?
So on one hand, you've got C.J. Stroud, probably most accurate. Feels like of the remaining guys, he's right there with Bryce Young. Feels like the safest. I know some people that have Stroud as their one. Richardson, we've talked about a bunch as the boomer bust type of play. And I think it's a fair assessment of him. And Levis is a little boomer bust. I'm also more likely to take a multi-year approach and say I wouldn't hate to have the top pick next year if needed, with Caleb Williams and potentially Drake May available there. So, oh man, I don't know. Stroud, I feel like you can win with Stroud on a rookie contract. I think you can win with him on a rookie contract.
How much? Stroud's, it's funny, like everyone's going to talk about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis being the most boomer bust or the most polarizing or the most like wide range of outcomes. I actually think Stroud might have an even broader range of outcomes because it's entirely down. Like he showed everything in that Georgia game, everything you want to see. And if that's the game you looked at to the exclusion of everything else, you'd be like, this guy is number one overall. Or if you value simply, we've talked before about doing it against the best opposition. That's what everyone looks for first. I'm going to go see how he played against Georgia. Like I've started tapes. That's how I started Will Levis tape. Let's go see how he did against Georgia, particularly that 2021 Georgia defense, like the best defense in college football history. Let's go see how he performed against that and then move from there. So it makes sense as an idea, but it's not necessarily accurate. And as it happens, Stroud had probably the best game of his college career against the Georgia defense in the college football playoffs. And if that's what you were focused on, you would be like, this guy's number one overall. He showed poise. He showed the ability to read quickly through progressions and get the ball where it needs to go. He understood defenses. He played well under pressure. He added on top of when the play broke down, all the things you want to see. Problem is, it didn't happen against most teams. So, and actually, some of those things that were strengths against Georgia were consistent weaknesses in his tape, generally in college. So, do you come out of that saying, well, he just proved he can do it in the NFL because he did it against the most NFL type of defense he's going to see? Or do you say, yeah, but he didn't do it against some much, much worse teams? That's way more scary. That's his problem. And to me, the fact that he didn't do it consistently against way weaker opposition is a huge red flag. And that would scare the hell out of me.
Part of what you said I really agree with, though, is that C.J. Stroud might be the most polarizing, in part because you're trying to figure out, okay, how much do you trust Georgia game versus the rest and all that fun stuff. But is he the most polarizing because of its pure risk assessment here? Because if you, like, when you slap labels on these quarterbacks and you say, boomer bust, high upside. Stroud, we've seen comps to guys like Jared Goff. They're a little bit safer. They're more accurate, but they don't have the cannon for an arm and this and that, right? If Stroud is quote unquote safer than the boomer bust guys, is that really what makes him polarizing? Because you're sitting there at 4 or 7 or 9, and you're saying, do I want a guy who's just accurate, right? I mean, like from a prospect standpoint, is C.J. Stroud closer to Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett, whereas the recency bias that I keep referencing every single show, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, all the guys with great tools, whether it's athleticism, arm, whatever it is, those are the guys that perhaps you're chasing in the top 10. I feel like that's why Stroud's polarizing, because the knock on him isn't just, we only saw it in one game. It's like, okay, how is he a carry the team type of guy? I think that's where people are going to land on him, and why you're going to say, do I want him at 4 or do I want the guy that could eventually carry me?
I also think, though, that we probably underestimate how wide a range of outcomes these sort of safer, quote-unquote, quarterbacks actually have. Like, Jared Goff is not a terrible comp for him. And Jared Goff has, on the positive end of his NFL career, been a top 10 quarterback in an offense that was dominant. An offense was absolutely cooking. Sean McVay's offense, at the peak of its powers, Jared Goff looked like a top 10 quarterback. He's also looked like a completely non-functional quarterback in, disastrous Jeff Fisher offense, and then the Rams offense when it fell apart. And his sort of range has been all over the shop. Like now you've got in Detroit where the numbers are really good. Goff himself isn't necessarily playing that amazingly. So, like, if he's something akin to Jared Goff, we think of that as middle of the road, get you on the fairway, standard, good quarterback. but it's also a guy that could be anything from legitimately part of a Super Bowl winning or a Super Bowl capable team to this doesn't function anymore. This is a train wreck. Like, we need to move on. So I don't know that I don't know that he's the safer pick from those three guys.
All right. Well, no, I mean, it makes sense. I understand what you're saying. Safe and risky or boom or bust isn't necessarily it's not necessarily the way to think about it, but I think that's maybe how the NFL will. So let's pick a quarterback. Who do we want here?
Of the three, I would take Levis, but I think I would be in the minority.
Levis would probably be my third of Stroud, Richardson, and Levis here.
Yeah, that's where I think most people would have him.
Yeah. I might go what I feel like is the safest route in Stroud. You know, like as a team builder, I might say, give me Stroud and I'll trust the model and figure out the rest.
Trust the model.
Got to trust the model. Hashtag
Where's the
trust
model have Stroud?
Listen, I've focused mostly on non-quarterback. I need a better strategy with the quarterback model here. Because,
Okay.
like, overall it's good, but it's such a binary hit or miss type of thing. Mm-hmm. I got to figure it out a little bit more. But there's nothing data-driven. I don't think anyone has anything data-driven over the last few years with in the time period we're talking about that would have properly pointed to Mahomes, Herbert, Allen, and that's going to skew everything. Dak. Like, none of those guys were stars from a data perspective. So when you rely on data, I need more scouting data, basically, baked into the model before we get there. But my feeling is Stroud's going to be, I haven't run it yet, but Stroud's probably going to be good. Richardson and Levis, not so good. And Bryce Young, good. So my guess would be it's going to be Bryce, Stroud, Levis, Richardson from a data perspective.
Okay.
Knowing what I know about the model and what it values. So let's go Stroud.
All right.
Trust the model-ish.
Yeah. Just a model that you just said not to trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're going Stroud. So we're sitting at 4. And we've got the rest of our draft capital. Now let me make this statement. The Colts aren't as bad as they looked last year.
Okay.
Right? So we're closer. We're closer than you think. But my issue with the Colts era, we've described the Lions and all these other teams as getting incrementally better in the trenches and all these various places. The Colts were great on the offensive line for a couple of years. It fell apart a little bit, but they could salvage that. They never made plays on the perimeter, right? When they brought in Carson Wentz a couple of years ago, I said, you cannot have Carson Wentz without an elite group of pass catchers. You just can't do it. Like, he won't succeed. I said this about the Colts 2 years ago. I said this about Washington last year. And Washington at least tried with Jahan Dotson and everything. You can't do it. So the Colts have been lacking. It's Michael Pittman and friends. They brought in Alec Pierce last year and everything, and they've got the big boys at tight end and Mo Alley Cox and Jelani Woods, but they need more on the perimeter for our quarterback. And if we're going to pick whether it's Stroud or Richardson or anybody, none of those guys are succeeding unless we get the fantasy football players in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. So play fantasy football and get some playmakers.
Okay.
That needs to happen.
So who's your playmakers?
Put me on the spot here. They could be in the DeAndre Hopkins sweepstakes. I think any of those teams that have enough draft capital. Colts are back middle of the pack here after years sitting at the top of salary cap space.
They'd make an annoying amount of sense for Brandon Cooks if it wasn't a within the division trade, which do happen. It's not like it's never happened
They
before,
do. We might overrate those a little bit, but
yeah, I mean, if the Lions can trade TJ Hawkinson to the Vikings, it feels like the Texans can trade Brandon Cooks to the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Cooks. And Cooks is he's like a little Band-Aid. He's a transitional quarterback, receiver for you here, bridge receiver as you're getting younger at that position. They might be another team that wants to use their early second on a receiver for any of that, the Zay Flowers group if they fall.
There's also, he doesn't necessarily need to be a transition guy. It's just that he never stays anywhere for more than a couple of years. But he's only 29 still.
It's amazing. He's played like 15 teams. Been traded multiple times for good draft picks. The Colts have also looked at their defensive line over the last couple of years. Remember, they spent their first 2 picks in 2021, right, with Kwity Paye and Dayo Odeyingbo. They still feel like they need help on the D line as well. So it's not a great roster. It's just probably not as bad as they looked last year.
No.
So I think going to the D line and playmaker is what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, last year everything fell apart. like the reason that they traded for Matt Ryan in the first place, because they thought they had a good team and they just needed slightly better quarterback play, or the same, an improvement over Carson Wentz to jump back to the Phillip Rivers period of quarterback play, and we'd be a playoff team, we'd be contending maybe, and then the whole thing fell apart. And they kind of said that themselves, that the thing that they sold Matt Ryan wasn't the thing that they ended up having. Now, to an extent, some of that is they probably miscalculated, but a lot of those pieces are still there. There is no real reason that it was as bad as it was last season.
That's what I'm trying. Like, when you look at the depth chart for the Colts, I thought Bernard Ryman, he had a rough start, but he ended up settling in as a decent left tackle.
Well.
Right. So he was fine down the stretch. He was a third-round player. Model loved him. Who, I think is going to be fine. So I think left tackle looks fine. Quentin Nelson, he was a big disappointment last year as far as how well he played at left guard. Right tackle Braden Smith, probably a tick below where he normally would be, but 3/5 of your offensive line I think are fine. Ryan Kelly at center, and then right guard is just up in the air. But Ryan Kelly at center, solid enough right now, 2 more years of him. I think you're just looking at right guard, and you just kind of roll with it. As bad as they looked last year, I thought Matt Ryan made it look worse. There was unblocked pressure, and any time he had any semblance of pressure, Matt Ryan just looked like a 37-year-old who couldn't move. I mean, that's what it was. It looked worse. So I don't know if there are specific plays to be made on the offensive line other than shore up right guard, get some depth, right? Need better depth than you've had the last couple of years. But I think most of the pieces are there for Indy, so it's not an O-line type of offseason, I don't think, for the Colts.
There can't be that many people that had as bad a debut and then immediately turned it around as Bernard Ryman. Like his debut was that
penalties?
Broncos game, right? Where he had, and they were all like holding penalties, holding or false start. Everything was a penalty that was I can't hang at this level type of penalty. And then almost immediately it was like, no, I'm actually good. It was jitters. Just nerves. We're okay now.
I mean, you would play like that too if you played in the very worst game in NFL history.
True.
Recent NFL history, the 12-9 game.
I mean, he was a third-round pick, but remember, he was a guy that we had a first-round grade on, who has this, slightly strange backstory of, he's Austrian, I think. He hasn't played football as long as a lot of these other guys, and yet despite that is actually quite a sound technician, and there's a chance that he could get quite good quite quickly. So the fact that he was able to turn that around immediately, I think is probably a good sign. The fact that his overall baseline of 73.3 PFF grade was pretty damn good. In fact, almost the second best in the entire offensive line, I think is a good sign. Ryman could actually become a strength of that offensive line pretty quickly.
So look, I think the line's fine for the Colts. Like every other team that needs playmakers, I'm thinking about the DeAndre Hopkins market. I'm thinking about the T. Higgins market if it exists. The Brandon Ayuk market that I just started during the last segment. I want someone to be there with Michael Pittman. I like Michael Pittman as a player. He's a 2. I think he's a 2, right? Or I want him to be my 2, much like T. Higgins, right? I'm talking about trading for Higgins. I think Higgins can be a 1. I think he's probably a tick better than Pittman and has a little bit more of that number 1 ability. But when you pair him with a Pittman, it looks that much better. Now you're in that like Mike Williams, Keenan Allen as a combo type of world. So I'm exploring that market here if I'm the Colts.
Yeah.
So get the playmakers. I love Jelani Woods. I'm going to throw to Jelani Woods more because he's 6'7", 280. And good things happen when you throw to Jelani Woods. So we're gonna trust that. We're gonna trust the line for Stroud, add some depth there, and then look on the defensive side of the ball. You still have DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, been solid as the former first rounder. We need some more juice off the edge here. I think Nolan Smith from Georgia, undersized edge rusher, missed most of the last season due to injury. He could be a guy whose value ends up really good in like a Nakobe Dean who goes into third, like Nolan Smith because of the injury and being undersized, but he's got that, he does have the juice off the edge that could play here in Indy. So I would try to grab him. They're
going to need to get younger at cornerback as well. So probably not in the first round or so, but they could be a landing spot for a bunch of cornerbacks that are in the mid rounds, and there's a ton of them in this draft.
Yeah, that's a good idea, right? So you can go receivers and edge, maybe the first few picks after the quarterback, and then load up on corner depth. because it matches the draft. And go trade for a receiver. Did we fix the Colts?
Yeah, more or less.
Any other plays we could make here in Indy?
No, I think we're good.
If you want more on the Anthony Richardson specific analysis, though, I thought last show during the Raiders section, I'm trying to remember all this stuff because we go on these tangents and everything, but I broke down Richardson a little bit more in depth and everything. So if you think Richardson could be in play and you're a Colts fan or a Texans fan or whatever, go listen to the Raiders part of the Fixing the AFC West show because we got a little bit more in depth on Anthony Richardson and some of the pros and cons of him as a prospect.
For cornerback, I like them getting Travius Hodges Tomlinson simply because he's the nephew of LaDainian Tomlinson. So, bloodlines are strong.
Yeah, that's good. The TCU defense had Hodges Tomlinson, and then a guy named Hodges, and I think a guy named Hodge, all on the same starting 11.
Yeah.
Mass confusion. I mean, that's why they got smoked by Georgia. No, they were good.
That's why.
They were good up until that point. All right, next up in the AFC South, it is the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags.
The Jags.
Their biggest free agent is right tackle Jawan Taylor. They just re-signed Roy Robertson Harris this weekend. Big 6. I think of him as 6'7". He's listed at 6'5". Why do I think he's 6'7"?
I don't know.
Tall defensive tackle. Re-signed him up front extended him 3 years, $10 million. But it's really just Corey Peters as far as starters on the defensive side who are free agents. A couple depth pieces like Arden Key, Dwayne Smoot. So another team, right, that doesn't have a ton missing. The other big one's tight end, Evan Ingram. And basically their top 3 tight ends, or 3 out of their top 4, are all free agents. Evan Ingram was a very good receiving option down the stretch. They had him on a 1 year? Yeah, they had a 1 year, $9 million deal for Ingram. Loved that last year. I mean, if you could bring back Ingram for 1 year, $9 million again as a receiving tight end, I would do that. But another team, I would say receiver 1, be in the market for all those guys.
Yeah, except, Calvin Ridley probably coming back. He applied for reinstatement, right? That was like the last we heard of that.
I'd let him in.
You would?
I would let him back,
Okay.
yeah. If I was commish.
Yeah, sure.
If I was making $43 million a year for a day as Roger Goodell, I'd say let him back.
What's $43 million divided by 365? How much is that earning you for a day's work?
Hey Siri, what's $43 million divided by 365?
43 million divided by
Oh, God.
365 is approximately 117,808.2191.
Huh.
It's a pretty good salary for a
It's
day.
a pretty good day's work.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could get that.
What do you think those checks look like every 2 weeks?
I don't know. I think he earns a lot more than that now as well.
Is he over
I
43
think
million?
it's a lot more than 43. Yeah.
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 Good for Raj.
I mean, I'd take 120 grand to say yes to Calvin Ridley.
He makes that much money so he can be the face because he's so good at saying nothing at the 3 press conferences he does a year.
And remember the congressional hearing where you had to go and spend a whole day saying nothing.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Yeah. If you could say nothing and never, tie yourself in knots,
or
4 or 5 times a year,
or get angry or show any kind of emotion, just deadpan, say nothing, deadpan waffle, no matter what's thrown your way.
you need some thick skin.
You too can get $50 million a year.
You're going to get booed every public appearance.
Yes, people will hate you,
Yeah.
but that doesn't matter because you're rich.
You're walking on stage and I'm making $118,000 today to get booed. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like draft weekend, he's almost making $500,000 just to walk
you
out there and announce some picks.
Right. You walk out, the chorus of booze rains down upon you, and in your brain, all you're thinking of is the pool that you're adding to the house based off this day's work.
Yeah.
I'd do that.
Yeah. It's easy to tune out the booze, I would
It's
say.
very easy. Just focus on the thing you're buying with the money you're earning for this boo.
This is why we're a top 5 NFL podcast featuring an Irishman.
Yeah.
That's why. So with the Jags, I keep saying wide receiver 1 only because when Calvin Ridley was the guy, they traded Julio Jones. It didn't go great. That was his worst season. When Calvin Ridley was a 2 with Julio Jones as the guy, he's a great route runner. He's a good short, intermediate threat. He's decent down the field, not great. But maybe it's with Calvin Ridley plus Zay Jones plus Christian Kirk. You can make it happen. Either way, I loved the buy low move of bringing Calvin Ridley in for the last year of his contract here.
And he did have some really impressive numbers while Julio Jones was there, but when Julio Jones was injured and out of the game and he was essentially the number 1. Then when he was the true number one, after they'd gotten rid of Julio Jones, the entire offense started to kind of fall apart anyway. So I'm not sure it's quite as simple as he can't function as that alpha guy in the offense. I think with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback and Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, and if they bring Evan Ingram back and then Calvin Ridley, that I think he could function as a number one.
The reason why I keep saying this, and why I, in past years, loved an Allen Robinson here for the Jags, making his return, whatever it might be, was more stylistically for Trevor Lawrence, because I want him throwing to a big-bodied receiver down the field. I think he's got that back shoulder ability, Lawrence, the way he throws the ball. He's made some incredible throws to guys like Marvin Jones. Jones is a free agent, getting a little bit older. I just want that type of receiver as an option for Trevor Lawrence. And that's why, again, T. Higgins, not to say T. Higgins for everybody, but they should be calling the Bengals about T. Higgins as well. If we're in year 3 of Trevor Lawrence, you're in the middle of that window, attack with playmakers. That's how you're going to potentially take that next step here.
Mm-hmm.
What else we got here for the Jags? Right tackle, Jawan Taylor. He's an interesting player. He's really developed as a pass blocker. Coming out of Florida, he was kind of the opposite. It was Mauler in the run game. He struggled in the run game, whiffed on a ton of blocks last year. But he's only 25 years old and starting to improve. I don't love him, but knowing the age and the fact that this is where offensive linemen break out, Taylor's going to have a market here at right tackle.
This was a weird offensive line. It was by far the most one-dimensional line in the entire NFL. They were dead last in PFF run blocking grade as a unit, but they ranked like top 10 as a pass blocking group. They were pretty good. So obviously that's the more important element, particularly if Trevor Lawrence is the guy that's supposed to carry this team to new heights. But it makes it difficult to kind of get a handle on exactly how good this offensive line is, even at an individual component level, and how you want to go about improving it, because most of them are actually reasonably good or have been reasonably effective from a pass blocking standpoint. It's the run blocking that's really been an issue. And you can offset that to a large degree with a guy like Travis Etienne, who has the explosion and the burst to turn small gaps into giant plays, even when the overall blocking isn't there. So their offensive line, I think, is a difficult one to figure out exactly how to approach going forward.
They schemed up some of those explosives as well, right? When you get Etienne in space, and I know Walker Little has been the backup tackle the last couple of years. He could step in at right tackle. I don't love any of them. Cam Robinson has just been okay the last couple of years. He's gotten better, but they've got him locked up. I don't love Walker Little, so I would invest draft capital. They could be a DeJuan Jones in the second round type of team as well, in my opinion. So I think there's a little bit maybe more to do as far as adding some depth there. And then defensively, I think they've made big strides, right? There's definitely some games where you saw the playmakers, the Trayvon Walkers and Devin Lloyds and Josh Allen, and some of the athleticism that they bring to the table, but they just need they just need better players, more consistency. But there's a chance that this defense takes a huge step forward this year with that youth. Who knows if Trayvon Walker ever starts to figure it out, if he really is a Rashawn Gary late bloomer type. That late blooming started late year 2 for Rashawn Gary, so we could see a little bit from Trayvon Walker. Devin Lloyd, as I mentioned, the other first-round pick, showed flashes, but he was inconsistent in and out of the lineup, still like Chad Muma at linebacker. There's a question about Shaquille Griffin. He had a down season. If he's a guy that's a cut candidate here, but I think there's definitely some more playmakers to add on the defensive side here.
Doesn't it also feel like we've been saying this for several years about the Jags defense, that the pieces are there? Like, there's a lot of young talent. If they just develop at some point, they're going to be really good. And then they never develop, any of them, ever.
Yeah. So
that feels problematic.
It does. They got picked 24, 56, 88, so 3 in the top 100. You going, if we go the trade route, if we bring in someone else at receiver, like I'm thinking about, you might lose some of those picks. But even if you don't, are you going to go defense early on here, or thinking about Trevor Lawrence a little bit more on offense?
I'm not blown away at the idea of adding receivers to this group. I would add one maybe, but I don't necessarily mind where that comes from. So I wouldn't be rushing to do it in the draft. I think they can add they just need to add a body to the receiver room. I'm not even sure that needs to be the top guy, the alpha. This is all assuming Calvin Ridley comes back and is reinstated. If he isn't,
right.
If Raj says no for his $120,000 a day or whatever it is, then it's a totally different conversation, because now you're back where you were this year, which is, hey, the Christian Kirk thing worked fine, but you really need that number one guy. So that's totally different. But assuming they do get Calvin Ridley back and he's anything like what he was when he got suspended, then I think they have the bodies to work with. You just add another option to the receiving room somewhere. They don't have, they're over the cap right now, but they've got plenty of time or plenty of ability to free up some space. They're in the same kind of bracket as Minnesota, Buffalo, Miami in terms of being able to free up money, so they could spend in free agency or accommodate a big contract for a guy they trade for, a Brandon Ayuk plus extension, a T. Higgins plus extension, whatever. To me, I would still add bodies to that defense until it actually starts to come around and play to some of the talent.
Before we do that, one other option at 24 could be the tight end, Michael Mayer. I love pairing him with teams that have decent receivers, right? Especially with the tight end need there. Even if you did bring Evan Ingram back. Now we're talking Doug Peterson at his best with multiple tight ends and multiple options. That's why I keep saying maybe receivers still a play here, because they did such a good job scheming it up for Christian Kirk. They play to their receivers' strengths pretty well in Jacksonville, so having different skill sets does always help. So I think tight end could be in play. I'm with you as far as adding more to the defense. I do wonder if they do end up moving on from Shaquille Griffin, or even if they keep him. The other side, they had the breakout season from Tyson Campbell. Still need more bodies out there. Darius Williams is there as well. Are they in play for one of those late first-round corners if the Joey Porter Juniors of the world are available? A deep group of corners. I think at least one corner in their first 3 picks in the top 80 there makes sense.
I could see them moving on from Griffin. The question they're going to have is, do you trust Darius Williams as your outside guy, and are you prepared to leave him there and say that that's where he's best?
That's where he is best.
And therefore you're actually focusing on a slot corner with your next guy, because you really don't have one of those if Darius Williams is your full-time outside guy.
I have to watch Brian Branch a little bit closer, but he's getting a ton of buzz right now. Plays safety, can play slot, can really do a lot. I don't know if he's available at 24 potentially, the Bama safety, star, nickel. But he could be just bring in a good defensive player to help in that secondary.
Yep. And then they really, nothing could help this defense more than Devin Lloyd remembering how he played the first 3-4 weeks of the season and doing that again, rather than how he played from every game subsequently.
Yeah, Lloyd should be good. I think those linebackers will take a good step in year 2 here.
He should be, but he really wasn't for most of the season.
Yeah, I understand.
It was so strange. A little bit. The first few weeks of his season were really odd to watch on tape, because he made a ton of plays. You could see all the things that everybody loved about him as a draft prospect, the range, the ability he has to make plays on the ball in coverage, his athletic ability and what he can do. But you saw also Olakun basically directing him pre-snap almost every single play. So Olakun was the guy, the green dot, the guy calling the defense, the guy getting everybody lined up. But half of his time pre-snap was spent doing that, and then the other half seemed to be spent getting Devin Lloyd in the right place almost every single play. So it's like Olakun's doing his own job and kind of doing half of Devin Lloyd's job as well, and then Lloyd was able to sort of make the play from that point on, and then he stopped making the play. I don't know if something broke down. Olakun tried to let him, stand on his own 2 feet after a while, although even late in the season you still saw him doing a lot of directing. But I don't know, that whole dynamic just seemed very strange.
Just going to throw one other name out there, number 56 on our draft board currently, Kayshon Boutte from LSU. First round potential.
That's really how you pronounce that, Boutte?
Yep.
Perfect.
Looked it up.
Okay.
What would you go with?
I would have said boot, based off how it's
Boutte.
spelled.
Boutte.
Boutte. Okay.
Boutte.
All right.
Someone can correct me. I've been wrong before.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying it's notable.
But the LSU receiver could be another nice second-round potential play. He was in and out of the doghouse with Brian Kelly at LSU and everything, but first round, maybe you get if Brian Branch is available, come back with Booty in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Corner, pick 80, 83, whatever they have. Boom, fixed. Jags. Sound good?
Yep.
Remember the Titans. Let's fix the Tennessee Titans. Was this the show that we forgot them last year, or was it the preview?
Previous year, I think. Maybe it was last year. One of these years, we definitely forgot the Titans.
Definitely forgot the Titans. Been freeing up a ton of cap space. Robert Woods released. What were the other releases? They had Woods and Taylor Lewan.
Yeah.
Both released. So when we kept saying a lot of these teams have starters returning and they seem fine, the Titans did until they had to clear all that cap space and they lost.
Did until they did.
Now they have a massive need at left tackle. They continue to need playmakers. They're just reshaping the roster here in Tennessee.
Yeah.
There's rumors about a potential Ryan Tannehill release if they were to move on from him. I don't know if that makes a ton of sense right now.
Depends what they do. What's the plan? Because it's probably quite clearly not Malik Willis based off everything they did last season.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. I don't think Tennessee, Mike Vrabel, they pick at 11. I don't know. They have 6 draft picks total. I don't know if it's a full rebuild in Tennessee right now. It's still the AFC South. They're a couple players away from being right back on track. Tannehill's good when he's healthy.
They are in the quadrant of not good when it comes to the combination of draft capital and spending room. They don't have a lot of money to spend. They don't have a lot of draft capital. They do at least have the capacity to free up a ton of money, some of which they've already done with the moves that you talked about. But this is not a team that's like, they're not in a position having already torn it down to then start the rebuild. If they're starting a rebuild, it's what Chicago did a year ago, where they're actually stripping this thing first before they can go anywhere.
We have Walt in the chat here referring to Walt in the third person.
That's a big red flag.
Walt thinks the Titans could move on from Tannehill.
Yeah.
Per Walt.
Generally speaking, referring to yourself in the third person, I think, is a pretty massive red flag.
Plus his name is all caps, and he refers to himself as Walt in all caps.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just accurate.
Yeah.
From the grammatical
That's his name.
standpoint.
That's his name. I don't know where to start here with Tennessee. I mean,
Well,
why are we here? I mean, I think we're here because all of the money has been spent on the Harold Landrys and Bud Dupree's of the world.
Let's start with that. I mean, it's a new regime now. They've changed GM. So, but let's quickly recap why that has happened, because they currently have a ton of money tied up in 2 generally ineffective pass rushers. They also made the decision to, instead of paying A.J. Brown, who's been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL since he entered the league, we're going to trade him away. We're going to sign Robert Woods for almost the same amount of money, and we're going to draft the biggest project in that first round of Treylon Burks to essentially replace him. Well, Burks was injured, and the offensive line fell apart, and the offense generally fell apart, so he wasn't able to make that kind of impact as a rookie. And Robert Woods just didn't look like the same guy after coming back from his ACL. So that was a complete and total unmitigated disaster. And a year later, you've cut Robert Woods, and now Treylon Burks has to be that guy because there's no other option. Those are 2 or 3 monstrously catastrophic moves from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah. So do we roll with so Tannehill has another year left on his deal, which was fine. I thought the Tannehill deal was fine, right? It was when we talk about what our team's going to do with Derek Carr right now. Tannehill at age 32 basically signed a 4-year extension or 3-year extension after being there in 2020, I think it was.
I mean, if you trade away or if you get rid of Tannehill, that to me is the start of the Chicago teardown job. Like if you get rid of Tannehill, to me that signals we're burning this to the ground, and then next year we'll start to rebuild from the ashes.
I just don't know if I want to do that with Mike Vrabel as my head coach.
Why not?
Well, first off, if I did try to tank or so, Vrabel's going to accidentally win 6 or 7 games.
Yeah.
He just will.
But that's why you make his life as difficult as possible and almost prohibit him from doing that by
That's
taking
why
all of his
John
good players
Robinson's
away.
not there anymore because he made
Well, he did it
life
accidentally.
difficult.
But you do what Chicago did, which is we're going to make it almost impossible for you to win games because you're going to have no good players left. There won't be anybody. Nobody. We're going to take all your receivers away, all your offensive linemen away. Your defense will have nobody except 21-year-olds. Good luck winning 7 games with this.
I don't know. You're saving almost $18 million getting rid of Tannehill. You still have 18, almost 19 in dead money. I think you just roll with it. It's his 35-year-old season. Wow, Tannehill's getting old.
Yeah.
Just roll with him for one more year.
For what? You can't win with this.
It's the AFC South.
How hard can it be?
Yeah.
Yeah, but now that the AFC South contains Trevor Lawrence and a Jacksonville team that's actually starting to look pretty good.
You want to go full
I mean, they're going to make the call.
Here.
Like, if they...
we got to re-sign Jeffrey Simmons, by the way. We'll re-sign... I paid Simmons the big money.
Right. If they...
Probably cut Bud.
If they dump Tannehill, that's the start of it. And it sounds like they might.
I didn't love Petit Friere at right tackle. I need a left tackle.
You need a whole offensive line. Ben Jones is the only guy in that offensive line that's like held his own.
And he's getting old in the last year of his contract.
Yeah. So you do need a complete offensive line. You need a wide receiver beyond Treylon Burks, several of them, in fact. Your tight end room is... Chika Okonkwo actually played well, so he becomes your number one guy.
Yeah.
Austin Hooper, who cares? Derrick Henry, you're stuck with his contract, and he can't carry this thing by himself. The defense, you've got some pieces, but it's not like it's being held together by Vrabel. I think you tear this thing down.
Only 6 draft picks.
Yeah. Trade everybody away that somebody will give you a draft pick for.
Who would take Tannehill right now?
Nobody. No, so I'm not saying Tannehill. I'm saying everybody. Like anyone that somebody will throw you a draft pick for, trade them away.
The teams that are willing to look at Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo certainly are going to be looking at Ryan Tannehill as well. It's a comparable piece.
I mean, maybe.
And they can get him for they can get him for half the price, basically.
He's a lot older and busted than those guys. Well, Jimmy G, but
yeah, at least for this year though, you can get him for like $18 million.
I don't think Derek Carr and Ryan Tannehill are in the same conversation at the moment.
Just because Carr's younger.
Yeah, and not as broken. Like the team, I don't think a team looking at Derek Carr is all of a sudden going, well, no, Ryan Tannehill. I think there are two different conversations.
Washington could play that game again. Tannehill could be good in Washington.
We've got, I think one of the, not to jinx it, but I think one of the interviews we have scheduled for the Combine is Ron Rivera. We can ask him about QB vibes and whether he vibed Tannehill.
You want to work on your
Sam Howell right now, but
you got to work on your journalism here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like we'll get to the Bucs later. Last year at this time, the Bucs were like, "Yeah, Blaine Gabbert's our guy." Of course, we're building around Blaine Gabbert.
They were lying, and everybody knew it.
But now they're doing the Kyle Trask thing. Like Kyle Trask, it's like literally the only QB on the roster. So Kyle Trask's team,
right?
And I don't know if Washington's doing the same thing like Sam Howell's team, just because he's the guy.
It's fascinating.
He's the only, just because it's him and Wentz.
Literally every single year, coaches, GMs, and NFL people ball-faced lie to journalists constantly. And then every year, you get this chorus of like, oh, they just said this guy's the starter. Yes, we don't believe them. Like, from a lot of experience of them lying to you in the past, we have decided on this particular occasion to not believe the words that are coming out of their mouth.
They're just trying to get back at journalists for when they lie.
Yeah.
Going back and forth at each other here.
So anyway, like, they can spend the next 7 months. 7 months? How many months is it? They can spend the next several months saying that Sam Howell is the starter. It won't be until day one happens and he is the starter that I believe it.
Oh, back to the Titans, Sam.
Back to the Titans. So I blow it up.
So we blow it up.
Who was the first team? This is the second team that we said they're the best move is to tear it down. Arizona.
Arizona makes a lot of sense, though.
So does this.
Arizona, but I like the teardown when it coincides with new GM and new head coach. That's what's happening in Arizona.
New GM, not new head coach. So here's the thing, right? Instead of getting...
I want you go walk into Mike Vrabel's office and say, look, Mike, we might need to take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. Okay, Mike? And then you... Listen, I was at training camp when the Bucs and Titans were having a joint practice, and they got into a little tussle, a little fight. Helmets flying everywhere and everything. And a helmetless, of course, Mike Vrabel just jumps into the middle of it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's no one No one you'd rather on your side
No.
in a fight than Mike Vrabel.
Uh-huh.
And you're going to walk into his office and tell him, tearing it down.
No. I'm going to summon him to my office. Let's start this thing the right way.
Ah, okay.
Power move. You can't go hat in hand to the man and be like, hey, Mike. You got to be like, Mike, I'll see you at my office at 9 a.m.
Is that how Russ
We've got
does
some
it?
things to discuss. Then when he comes in, take a seat.
Russ was like, hey, Nathaniel,
Then
meet me in my office
Here's
9
how it's going to
a.m.
work. Yeah. I read that article, by the way, after, and it's not, there's no new information in it. It's just like Russ had his own office and his people. We already knew that.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of words, painting
But even
pictures.
the people sounded entirely, like when it was said, the sort of, oh, Russ had his staff, and you thought like secretary, like social whatever. It was like a nutritionist, his own personal quarterback trainer, which we talked about. Or these guys are
Everybody
having a
should
larger and
have.
larger role
Yeah.
in the NFL anyway, and a physio or a some kind of body working human, physio trainer, whatever, something like that, right? Those seem like three fairly reasonable people to be involved directly with the quarterback of your team, even if it is outside of the organization technically. Like I don't know, the whole thing actually sounded vaguely reasonable, other than you gave him his own office on the second floor when the locker room is on the first floor, and all of a sudden you're putting him up with the coaches and the GMs. Like that's the goof. Actually, everything else kind of sounded reasonable. Anyway, I digress. My point being, you're like, in an ideal world, you tear it down, we get a new GM, a new head coach, and then we see if it works. How about we get a new GM, which we already have, and instead of a new head coach, it could be good or bad, we're going to start with a good coach. One that's already there. We already have a good coach. We don't need to find a new one. New GM, we're going to tear this thing down, and we know that if we do it right, we have a good coach who can build this thing really well. I don't think Mike's going to have a problem with saying this thing is a disaster right now. The last guy left me a mess, and it's going to take me 12 months to clear it up.
We're obviously speaking about discussions that have already happened. Rand Carthon's the new GM, former Gator.
Go Gators.
They've already had these discussions, right? They know this. But it would be interesting to see if they do go this route. The reason to do it, like you said, Trevor Lawrence is in the division. And just like if you have, not that he's at Mahomes level, but if you have a Mahomes in the division, or if you have a top, Josh Allen in the division, you're always saying, how am I going to compete with that every single year? Titans don't look like they're ready to compete with that going forward.
And they don't look
and
like
we saw them pass each other in the night.
And they don't look like they have the capacity to get there either, which is the problem. Like they don't have the roster to do it. They don't have the draft capital to build the roster, and they don't have the spending room to go and do anything different. So they are primed for a rebuild.
All right, so then what else are we doing?
Trading away everybody. There's a fire sale going on. For sale is hung on the depth chart and faxed.
You can't trade Harold Landry. The dead
every
money's
NFL
too
team.
crazy. You can't trade Harold Landry. You could trade Bud Dupree. Would you trade Kevin Byard?
Yeah, if anybody's listening and anybody wants to give me the offer.
Landry, Byard, Tannehill.
Tannehill, I don't think anybody's trading for. You're going to have to cut him, which I'm fine with.
Roll with Malik Willis and just see? Or are you drafting somebody at 11? Nobody's left.
I'm not drafting somebody because
Maybe if one of the top 4 falls.
draft pick is too valuable, but I might see if I can trade for somebody that won't be automatically ridiculed as a starting option. Like maybe, I don't know what the cost for Trey Lance is at the moment, but I might see what the 49ers would be willing to part with, or would be willing to take to get Trey Lance.
Now we're talking. Give me Trey Lance with Malik Willis backing him up?
Yeah. Like, I don't know what that costs at this point because the sunk cost is 3 first-round draft picks. I don't know what the depreciation is on Trey Lance at this stage, or if the 49ers are going to want to keep him because of the Brock Purdy elbow thing being potentially more serious than it sounded initially.
Now you have a good idea. I like that idea.
But I'd pick up the phone anyway and find out.
So you free up some money.
Mm-hmm.
I would sign players who will be part of the rebuild, as I always say. Maybe trade for Trey Lance with some of the new draft capital that you have from flipping some of the veterans. And we're resetting this Titans roster.
Yeah.
Get some playmakers in there. Traylon Burks, I think, will be fine, but another guy,
literally,
like a Pittman, I like him as a 2.
Literally everybody on this roster, I am open to phone calls for. So, Bud, if anyone will give me anything for Bud, gone. Byard, I would listen to offers for. Danico Autry, trade away potentially. I don't know, maybe Ben Jones, someone will give you something for a quality starting center. Anybody.
All right. We're
Open for business.
We're restarting in Tennessee. Have we fixed the Titans?
No, we haven't given them who you're drafting. Once you strip this thing down, let's say they don't acquire anything else in the first round, number 11.
Paris Johnson. Probably the most common pick. Ohio State offensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
He could play left tackle, step in for Taylor Lewan. That's what just feels so uncomfortable here, right? Like you had to get rid of Lewan. Now I have to replace him.
Yeah.
Right? I've got a million other things to do, but now I have to go replace Taylor Lewan and other things. So, yeah, this is going to be an uncomfortable offseason for the Titans. I think they have to take a step back here to reset things.
It also always feels, maybe this is only to me, but it always feels a little bit weird to, if you need like a complete offensive line, you got to start somewhere. But like bringing in a left tackle with a first-round draft pick, it feels like that should be a sort of transformative thing. You know, I spent a first-round pick, number 11 overall, on a player, and now you fix 1/5 of your offensive line.
Yeah, there's more to do. Yeah.
Like,
you have to do it, but it doesn't give you the feels.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you the feels, but it has to happen.
Uh-huh.
So I like Paris Johnson there. And then all the other types of players that we talked about.
Yes.
Second wave of free agency. Get all those guys. And re-sign Jeffrey Simmons. Sound good?
Yep.
Uh-oh. What's going on with Ultimate here? My depth charts. Didn't load. Atlanta Falcons are up next. And we get a bug. We get a bug in my system here.
A bug.
We have to cancel the show
Can't have it.
if the Falcons depth chart doesn't load.
Maybe it's the same thing bringing down Google this morning.
Oh, it's probably, yeah. There's oh no, this is bad. What's going on? So the Falcons are up next, and I have no idea who's on their team.
Ah,
'Cause I don't have the depth charts. Let's go to our lads.
Well, first conversation is, what are they doing at quarterback? Are they rolling with Desmond Ridder?
I don't want to.
You don't want to.
No.
But then what do you want to do?
I don't want to draft the other guys either.
You don't want to. So they pick.
I want Caleb Williams.
Caleb Williams. They pick at 8.
Yeah, I'm aware.
So that's 1, 2, 3 quarterback needy teams ahead of them in the draft, and Carolina 1 pick behind them.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, by that point, I don't think I'm going to trade up from 8. Too many other things to do in Atlanta. I mean, you might roll with Desmond Ridder and be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes next year. This roster has to get better, though. Arthur Smith's heading into year 3 here. They have to keep making strides. They were competitive last year. They played pretty well.
And the offense is actually kind of fun. Like, it's not bad either. The offensive line was really good in this system. They're losing Caleb McGarry to free agency. I would suggest they let him walk, because as good as he was this year and was incredible as a run blocker, pass protection still wasn't great, and they didn't pass block an awful lot. I wouldn't commit a big amount of money to him. So they're going to need a right tackle at some point. But their big thing is they need a defense. Anybody on defense. They have almost no impact players whatsoever on the defensive side of the ball. And even the ones that look like they found various points along the way, like A.J. Terrell, didn't have a good year. They just need talent on that side of the ball.
Well, let me ask you this. We keep saying, oh, nobody's going to be available. If Stroud is there, I think I would take Stroud. I mean, I think I would take, I don't know, would I take one of those quarterbacks?
I mean,
Anthony Richardson,
just
C.J.
imagine,
Stroud, if they're available there.
Just imagine Richardson in that offense.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I'd take Richardson. I think I'd take Richardson.
Like, think of how effective it was with Marcus Mariota, despite the fact that Mariota basically couldn't pass the ball.
I mean, Richardson's is not a better passer right now, but he could be.
No, but he's got a better arm and can make more spectacular plays, and he's
Yeah.
a far better runner than Mariota, even though Mariota is good at that. Like, this offense is already set up to have a very high floor with a guy like Richardson at quarterback, and then if he can do anything as a passer. And it's not like it's erratic, it's inconsistent, it's volatile, but it isn't like there are no passing traits to Anthony Richardson. Like, he wants to be a pocket passer. He wants to process. He wants to read defenses. It's just that right now he's really inconsistent at it, and when he doesn't, he goes just ad-libs and makes crazy things happen. Like, it's different to Malik Willis, who I don't think sort of showed those traits. Like, Malik Willis didn't really want to do those kinds of things. Malik Willis was like one read and then bounce. And the bouncing was special, and the one read often had the ability to be special because of his arm, but I think they're very different in terms of where they are right now from a sort of fundamental passing point of view.
All right, give me Richardson at 8 if he's there. We're talking about him going number 1 overall.
Yeah.
In other places. Maybe I will take that. You know what? What else are we going to do as the Falcons? Let me stick to my guns here. I'm taking a quarterback.
Defense.
I'm taking a quarterback.
Okay.
Taking a QB. And if that doesn't work, I'm taking a QB next year.
You're ruining Carolina's offseason is what you're doing. Carolina's sitting there at 9 going, this is a jackpot. Richardson's going to be here. Richardson's 1 pick away. They're writing the card out, and then Atlanta drafts Richardson.
Carolina's playing your game, but we'll talk about them in a second. We'll get there. I understand the defense has some serious issues, and we can go that route as well. What else do we have? Draft. I'm just losing my mind here because I can't get into ultimate. Don't know what's happening. Talking to my developers. What's going on, guys? No answer.
No, it's a rough scene.
It is. Average draft capital for Atlanta here, from what I'm seeing, 44.75, 8 total picks. And at least the cap situation's better than it was last year at this time.
Yeah.
A lot of cap space.
Yeah, ton of money, slightly above average draft capital. They can have a good offseason.
Using that on defense.
I think they have to.
They could make the Marcus Davenport play, the edge rusher that they've been looking for in Atlanta for the last 10 years.
Marcus Davenport would be interesting. They could also be the team to make what I think would be the sort of biggest splash of Javon Hargrave. He's probably
to go next to Grady Jarrett.
Yeah, he's probably like the prize of free agency, with Daron Payne getting taken off the market by the franchise tag from the looks of it. At that point, like, Hargrave is probably the key free agent at a non-quarterback position. Jesse Bates would be the other one, but safety I think is significantly less valuable. So that's maybe the first team I've come across that actually makes some sense to throw money at Javon Hargrave.
Do I have some answers here? I do not.
Great.
Okay, so yeah, I like it. Let's throw some money at the defense. I'll take a quarterback at 8 because what else are you going to do? Desmond Ridder looked okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to give him a chance to prove himself?
No. I mean, this is the NFL. It's a tough world.
It is.
You had a shot. You didn't grasp it with both hands. You played okay, and now we're in a position to get a guy we think is better. So unlucky.
As with every other team, I'm adding more playmakers as well. Love the Drake London pick. I'm also going to use Kyle Pitts better. I'm going to use him more in the pass game.
Is that your decision to make? Isn't that Arthur's call?
Smith, not blank?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I mean, technically it's both.
I mean, what would it take to trade Kyle Pitts at this point?
To trade him?
Yeah.
You can't trade him after drafting a number 4 overall.
$19 million dead money. Yeah, it's not helping at all. Yeah, but like, what a waste.
Yeah, I would use him more, but I'm not Arthur.
What a waste. Like, why?
I'm in fact neither Arthur.
You could have had Jamar Chase instead if you don't like tight ends. If you don't want to use a tight end, or you drafted a tight end that plays receiver.
Yeah. Or you could have just used him as your ex-receiver.
So I would use Kyle Pitts more. I would encourage him. Still only 23 years old. I would encourage him to be used more. So you have him and Drake London. You got those big-bodied dudes. Give them one of the shorter, give them a Josh Downs, speed and quicks at receiver as well.
And then literally every defensive player you can think of fits for the Falcons.
You can't go too crazy in free agency because then you lose all flexibility going forward. You become the 2014 Bucks, who just bought a whole bunch of players that didn't do much.
Yeah, well,
so
alternatively, you were, ridiculously concerned about the spending spree that the Patriots went on. Now here we are 2 years later, and they have plenty of cap space, and they're fine. So
do it wisely.
Yeah,
but it's because the Patriots paid a whole bunch of mid-tier type of free agents for a lot of money with outs after 2 years.
Yeah, I'm just saying that maybe you can spend in free agency. Just it's not a problem. As long as you plan it out, you're fine.
All right, are we fixed?
Yeah, as much as we can be, I think.
Is Ultimate fixed?
No.
Is other Ultimate working for you? Or is this just depth charts? Other things in Ultimate working, or is it just IQ falling apart here?
It's just IQ.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get some answers here, somebody?
Carolina.
Let's go Carolina Panthers. What I was going to say is the Panthers are employing your strategy of just spending a ton on the assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're getting a lot of big name assistant coaches or guys that were in head coaching searches and, the support staff. Looking good in Carolina.
Frank Reich is building out a good staff by the looks of it. And yeah, David Tepper does appear to be one of those owners. I mean, he was the richest NFL owner before the Waltons waded in and just like blew the scale to hell by being, 10x what everybody else is. And then maybe Jeff Bezos comes in for Washington and just, oh yeah, you think you're the richest? Watch this. Yeah, so David Tepper has that kind of money if he wants to just escalate this and go, you know what, my team has been unsatisfactorily pedestrian during my tenure. I'm going to change that right now by spending money in all the areas that you guys can't or won't. So yeah, I'm here for that.
Now, what do you want to do at quarterback? Number 9 and 7 total picks here. You have 9, 39, 61, and 93 in the top 100. At pick number 9, are you going to try to move up to 1? Move up to 4?
I mean, well, based off what we've been doing for other teams, they can't sit at 9 because apparently no quarterback is going to make it that far. Although actually, from what we've done, is Levis still around? We gave C.J. Stroud.
We maybe give Richardson to the Raiders.
We gave Richardson to Atlanta just now, so whatever, he's not making it to 9. We might have given Levis to the Raiders.
I think of all the teams, Atlanta is less likely to draft a quarterback. So I do think you're looking at 3 quarterbacks off the board and one of the top 4 available at 9, but it's your 4th option.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to, if they don't get a quarterback, they're kind of screwed. So can they afford to – that's a hell of a gamble. Can they afford to play that kind of Russian roulette where if you sit there and go, we're not moving from 9, we have faith that our quarterback will be there, and then he isn't? Now what do you do?
So you want to trade up?
Give it to Sam Darnold again?
No. I'm not giving it to Sam Darnold.
Give it to Matt Corral after a year healing from his foot?
So because you're at 9, though, are you willing to play the Derek Carr game? That's the other thing we've done here. We said Aaron Rodgers' best fit's probably the Jets, but if you're the Raiders, you're gonna play in that world too.
Well, this is where they might have to because you look at the landscape and what it's going to cost to get to where you're comfortable with in terms of drafting a quarterback, or you get into that Derek Carr sweepstakes, which doesn't sound like they've been tremendously active in. They're also another team that I don't know if they're in the Washington and Indianapolis bucket of being fairly snake-bitten when it comes to quarterbacks. Like, they traded for Sam Darnold, disaster. They traded for Baker Mayfield, even bigger disaster. They were willing to basically punt last year with drafting a quarterback. Matt Corral got hurt anyway, so they didn't get anything out of that. Now it's like they must be a very sort of chastened team when it comes to having drafted quarterbacks. Or not drafted, if it comes to acquiring quarterbacks.
How short-sighted do you want to be here? We always joked about the AFC South, how hard could it be? Well, the NFC South now. The reason why every team has been linked to Derek Carr is because you can win the division with Derek Carr right now. If we have just released Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, you could pick up Ryan Tannehill for like an $18 million cap hit here, $20 million cap hit for this year as a bridge, but the best bridge you've had since Bridgewater.
The best bridge since Bridgewater.
Do you go Tannehill? Frank Reich working with him as you're building the rest of the roster here in Carolina? Remember, their defense played really well last year. They were almost close to competing in the NFC South.
We traded Lamar somewhere, right? Didn't we have somebody acquiring Lamar Jackson?
Well, I was sending him to Seattle.
Carolina would be an interesting. Yeah, that was ridiculous. I think we traded him somewhere else, though. Maybe Carolina would be an interesting team to see what Lamar Jackson would cost.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And by the way, what he would cost is an astronomical sum. When you consider what Russell Wilson went for, that has to be the starting ask for, like, 2 first-round draft picks is fine, but Russell went for, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 3 players, and like a 5th or something. So, like, that's the starting ask.
Yeah, the chat's talking about the Falcons maybe getting Lamar too. You get that same answer of that offense, right? That was so run-heavy last year and one-sided. The Falcons or Panthers could both be in the mix for Lamar Jackson. But it's 2 firsts plus $45 million guaranteed.
Yeah,
over 5
and
years.
they would struggle
probably
to make that happen from a salary cap point of view.
Yeah. The problem with so much guaranteed, again, is you lose the flexibility to just build the rest of the roster there. And I think Lamar's fantastic. You can't, like, Lamar's fantastic, but I think the Ravens have had, outside of receiver, as good of a support system for him as you can have. Coaching, front office, roster, other than receiver, Ravens have been really, really good. So you're taking him out of that ecosystem and into another one. There is risk attached to that. I think with Carolina, I would stay, take a swing at quarterback this year because you always have to, and then keep swinging in the draft.
So what's your swing, though?
The fourth guy.
What if this fourth guy isn't there?
Oh, man, then I have to go like a Garoppolo or something.
Because that's what we've done in this, is that the 4 quarterbacks are gone by the time Carolina comes up at 9.
Would we package to go up to 3 to get the second quarterback off the board to Arizona? Maybe the third quarterback off the board?
I think it would be the second. So you'd have to, you would be jumping in.
Because the Colts could go to 1, and the Texans are at 2. The Texans could go to 1, and then the second quarterback's off the board.
If the Texans
Three.
Jump to number 1, draft a quarterback, Chicago doesn't move from 2. They draft their defensive player. Arizona would be sitting there, presumably going to draft a defensive player, but then the Colts would be up next drafting a quarterback. So you would be jumping the Colts and the Raiders, and unbeknownst to you, also Atlanta, who apparently are going to draft Anthony Richardson one spot ahead of you, by doing that. But you'd have to make the call after those first.
We're not like simulating the NFL season here. We're trying to give all the scenarios.
No, we're doing it now. It's Monday morning. It's 9:30. We're keeping. The whole thing's going to make sense. It's one entire webway of an NFL offseason.
Somebody keeping track of this? They could keep track of every move we've made
right now.
Kelvin Beachum signs with 17 teams.
So that's the question. After those first 2 picks, are you jumping up to number 3 to draft the second quarterback off the board? Which again, this is the problem I have this year, is that I don't trust any of these guys enough to make that kind of commitment.
Yeah, I don't want to.
But equally, I don't want to come away with none of them if I'm at 9, which is entirely possible.
How much do you let past moves affect your future moves? Because we've talked about the Colts, snake bitten, Panthers, snake bitten, right? Like, you've just been sitting here. This is what the Broncos did last year. Multiple years of Bridge, Flacco, and Keenum, and Bridgewater.
And then you finally go to hell with this.
And then you're like, that's it, we're going to get Russell Wilson.
Right.
Does that have to influence your decision? If you're the Colts or if you're the Panthers? Like, the Raiders are like, we just got rid of Derek Carr. We hope we get that next guy, The Texans, of course, have to get somebody because they haven't had a quarterback in years or since, trading Watson. But the Panthers and Colts feel the most desperate. If we're the GM of the Panthers, do we have to play desperate, because that's what Tepper probably wants here in year 3?
But there's also there's a case of how long everybody has. Now, Carolina they just hired a new head coach, so you would assume there's a little bit of breathing room there. But like David Tepper, their rich owner who's spending like crazy to try and get a winner somewhere, is probably running out of patience at this point. If you're going to be like, hey, David, thanks for all the spending money, we don't actually have a pathway through to a competent team or quarterback right now, so we're gonna burn another year if that's cool. But it's good because next year there's some really good quarterbacks available. Like, they're going to need to come up with a better plan than that just to present to the owner, I would say.
So what are we doing?
I feel like they have to be in some kind of veteran market, but I'm not sure what that looks like. They haven't sounded too interested in Derek Carr. Derek Carr is the clear best option from a sort of freely available quarterback, or likely to be freely available quarterback point of view. Could they be a surprise entry to the Aaron Rodgers thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would play that game if I was Carolina. I would look into this is what all those teams, the Colts and Commanders, who landed on Carson Wentz each of the last 2 years respectively, they played those games, right? They were in on Stafford, in on this, and they failed. But like, if I'm the Panthers, you have to at least be in on Rodgers and in on Lamar, I think. At least play that game. But once you get down to Derek Carr, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that.
I mean, the alternative is you really do play it patient again. Either trust the quarterback will or won't be there at 9. Draft one if he is. Don't if he isn't. And then just hope you can do the patch job and take another patchy year quarterback and try and do it again next year.
Yeah, I think that's it. So if there's a quarterback that falls, I'm taking one. If not, keep taking the best players. What's that going to look like with this roster if my depth charts could ever come back? They've done better work on the offensive line. There's people saying maybe Brian Burns as a potential trade candidate to get more draft capital. I wouldn't hate that. I mean, I just think he's a good playmaker. You'd have to pay him. He's due soon, but he could be a good trade candidate to get draft capital somewhere and just add talent to both sides of the ball here.
They've done a pretty good job building back up their offensive line. They're not all the way there yet. So in the draft, if they kept 9 and didn't draft a quarterback, they could take an offensive lineman. I know, was it Jeremiah that gave them Peter Skoronski recently?
Put him at guard.
With the idea that he would kick into left guard. That makes some sense.
That would feel, you were talking about the Titans restarting their offensive line with just one player. That would feel not fun.
No, but at least that you could look at it and go, all right, that's kind of completed the job. The problem with the Titans thing is like you draft that guy and you still have a garbage offensive line. Carolina could draft him, plug him in, and go, all right, yes, it's a tackle that we're kicking into guard in the top 10, which feels sort of icky. On the other hand, it does theoretically fix the offensive line.
Not Iguanu.
No. On the other hand, it does theoretically fix the entire offensive line. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think that, in a weird way, is actually, you come away feeling better about that than you do about the tackle that may not change anything.
Well, that's the thing, right? When we talk about the NBA model, which is either go get your star or create the environment where the star wants to come to you, if you do create a really good offensive line in Carolina and load up on playmakers, I don't know who the star is a year from now that wants to come to you, but maybe there's one available that wants to come to your
or you're simply
environment that you've created.
Even if you don't create it as a draw, it at least means that whoever you end up putting in there has a better chance of it, better time of it. I mean, maybe Darnold could actually survive behind that and do okay.
You want to go with Darnold?
God, no, I don't.
I know you. This show's going off the rails here. If you're
at no point have I wanted to go with Sam Darnold for basically the entirety of his NFL career.
Have we done enough to fix the Panthers? All we've done is talk through a bunch of scenarios where we hate the fact that they're picking at 9.
Not really, but that's what we've dealt.
Go get all the same players we told you to get for other teams.
Is Darnold a free agent now?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I wouldn't bring him back.
He is. So roll with PJ.
Oh, God. Wouldn't do that.
How about a season of PJ to get to Caleb Williams?
I mean, if you're doing that, you might as well throw Matt Corral out there, surely.
Would you blow it up in Carolina?
No.
You could trade a Brian Burns. You can just kind of tread water at quarterback.
I wouldn't blow it up.
Add young talent.
I don't think that they're quite in the blow it up realm. But I would listen to offers for Brian Burns. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive.
But aren't they in this spot too because they went and got Stephon Gilmore for half a year? Like they played like they were being competitive. They tried to be competitive when they should have been rebuilding. And now they're in this middle tier of 9th pick, still don't have a quarterback, might not have one of the top 4 quarterbacks as an option here. Pretty good roster, but like they were only competitive last year in the NFC South because the whole South was terrible.
But they're not quite where Tennessee is in terms of the whole thing is falling apart around them. They don't have any cap space. They don't have any draft picks. They're in that sort of mode where it's primed for a rebuild.
They're just dead smack in the middle of cap space and draft capital and with no quarterback.
Right.
They are middle tier everything with no QB.
In a middle tier division. Like I think that they can realistically say we're in a reasonable spot. Frank Reich is a good head coach. We've assembled a really good coaching staff. This thing should move in the right direction if we can just find a quarterback. And maybe there is no obvious pathway to that guy right now. It might have to wait a year.
All right. Do we have any other options for Carolina here? Sorry. I'm trying to make sure my stuff gets fixed.
There are no options. They're kind of screwed.
Wow.
I mean,
we have to give them options.
We've given them a lot of options. They're just not good.
I'd be like, they're one of the teams, like I think Washington, I'd be tempted to go Derek Carr. But I'm only tempted because I'm looking at what's around me. And with Washington, I feel like there's enough of an infrastructure there that you can get the most out of them. So I'd look at that too. But I'd swing for Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, and maybe think about Carr. but I think I'd prefer to land on Garoppolo at the right price while continuing to draft quarterbacks.
So according to Peter King this morning, Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr not eyed by the Raiders, Colts, Texans, or Panthers. So I'm kind of with you that I think Carr is their best option, but they don't appear to be interested in Derek Carr.
Well, I'm the GM now.
Okay. So
I'm probably not interested either. All right. We got anything else? We have 2 teams left.
Uh-huh.
30 out of 32 done here.
Let's go.
I feel like we fixed enough with we discussed the Panthers enough. Maybe we didn't fix them. Maybe Panthers fans are going to be upset with us. We didn't give enough tangible answers there.
They usually are.
But we can't sit here for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Saints push the credit card down a little bit further, down the path. They got picked number 29 via 16 different teams, most recently, originally San Francisco. 8 total draft picks for the Saints. And, of course, all of their contract restructures still to go to get back into get their cap space back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fascinating pick that's been on a journey. Yeah, well, the Saints are like the rest of this division. Nobody has a quarterback.
Same quarterback question.
Yeah, and they obviously are much less capable of getting one, picking at the ass end of the first round, not in the top 10.
Jameis Winston's still on the roster for next year. Andy Dalton's a free agent. Dalton played pretty well, but there was something missing there with that entire offense. They're an interesting team. Michael Thomas, with a lot of money there, that probably he'll like officially get released at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the remaining playmakers are intriguing with Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry and, of course, the great Rashid Shaheed, who is just unstoppable.
They are the worst team in the NFL in terms of the combination of salary cap space and draft capital. They have not much of either.
Cap space will be there, but they never really have flexibility.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, yes, it's not as bad as it looks, but in order to get it to not as bad as it looks, they need to hemorrhage players and restructure guys a lot. So it's not like they take it from terrible looking to we have a ton of spending space. Like they can get to being fine, but they're not going to be massive free agent players other than just restocking guys that they had to get rid of.
They had the sleepover with Derek Carr. Are they still in play there? Because they were talking trade initially before Derek Carr said, no, just release me.
Yeah. They were wasn't that one of the teams that I just read out?
I don't know, you read it fast. That's what
I read it too fast for you to listen to.
Just to comprehend every single team. Colts, Raiders.
No, they're not. They're not one of those teams listed. Raiders, Colts, Texans, and Panthers were the teams not interested in Derek Carr. Therefore, the Saints, by double negatives, are interested.
Saints also have Marcus Davenport, who we keep talking about as one of the top free agents as a free agent. David Onyemata, who we keep telling every team to sign, is a free agent here. So, yeah, there's some work to do in New Orleans. The push in the credit card thing, it's not just that. It was 5 draft picks for Chris Olave and all that stuff. Look, the Saints have to me, if I'm running the Saints, you can only play the high risk game in one area. You're either going to play it with the cap or you're going to play it in the draft. They've done it with both in New Orleans. In other words, trading multiple picks to go get Marcus Davenport, trading 5 picks essentially to get Chris Olave. They would have pick 10 this year if they hadn't traded it to Philadelphia. Chris Olave is awesome. I think he's fantastic, but they'd have pick 10 here, right? These are I'm not saying don't do that necessarily, but you have to understand the consequences here.
So you made the point last show or the show before that the Saints have been the best drafting team in the NFL, essentially, outside of quarterback.
They have. When I've looked at WAR added for non-quarterbacks, just to put apples to apples here, non-quarterbacks, it's the Saints and the Chiefs.
And they appear to be taking the approach that means that we can zero in on these guys that we think are amazing and trade to go get them. Whether it's trading future assets to get into this draft again, whether it's trading current assets to move up in this draft to get this guy. Whereas to me, if that's a real thing, that the Saints identify talent better than other teams, it means you should take the opposite approach. It's like, no, we can actually afford to trade down because we're better at this than other teams. We can let a guy come to us because we identify the players that are worth picking better than the other NFL teams. At the very minimum, it feels like you should not be trading up, like reducing your assets in the draft because you're better at it. You are better with those assets than other teams, so stop reducing them.
So I agree, man. It's one of the interesting things when I'm looking at my hashtag draft model. It's not so much here's this ranking of players and just use it at all times. There's like a strategy attached to it too, which is only if you had only drafted the players that you feel best about.
Yeah.
And you truly limited your board. So I do wonder if the Saints have that type of approach where they limit their board to like 50 players or something like that.
The Patriots idea, right? That their draft board is only ever like 45 guys long.
Yeah. And I didn't get it at the time hearing that, but I kind of get it now because again, the thing about the model too, like the way I've looked at it, it's not that you just have, here are the players that I love the most and here's my top 50. There are players in every round that say the model likes. So theoretically, you're going to have players in every round, fewer as you go, but that check the boxes, so to speak. So if the Saints do pare down their draft board that much, potentially, that could be one of the reasons why they hit higher than others. They're better at paring it down, and then they have to be more aggressive because they're going to run out of players, and then you lose the strategy. So I don't know if it's as simple as like just draft 12 times, because you'll run out of players within that strategy.
Yeah, but to me, what the approach there, so the problem is, like you said initially, is that they combine this with this free agent / salary cap approach they have of maxing out the credit card and then having to cut it down, which means they're almost always going into the draft needing to get a starter in the first round. Like, we've fixed almost all of our holes except this one, but we're fine because we got the draft pick to come up and that guy starts. So Trevor Penning, right now, Trevor Penning got hurt, so he didn't need to do this. They had James Hurst, and that worked out fine. So not the best example in the world, but like, we didn't get a left tackle. We now go into the draft needing to come out of the first round with a left tackle. Otherwise, we have problems. They do that over and over again. Whereas to me, if that was the approach where we're better at this, we've identified 45 guys, and once we reach the end of that list, we're simply run out of players. To me, that means that instead of loading up draft capital to go get one of those 45 guys, even if it means you got to go up, trade down and then trade to the future. So if you run out of guys, just start getting rid of all your draft picks for next year so that all of a sudden next year, now you've got like 15 draft picks and you can move around without it costing you anything.
Yeah, so that part I'm with you, man. I'm gonna load up on draft capital here. I don't think you can keep playing this game if you're the Saints. This game works when Drew Brees is the quarterback, right? If you don't have a quarterback, you're just a middle tier team. If you don't have an elite quarterback and you're playing this game of pushing the credit card,
they're a team that Derek Carr makes sense for, though, to me,
because they lack other options in the draft.
Because they're okay as a roster, they have no shot at one in the draft, and
you have a dome.
They already tried to get him.
Okay, that's fine. I'd look at Carr. I'd also look at the next wave of QBs in the draft, the Herndon Hookers and Stetson Bennett's, Clayton Tune. I would draft. I mean, every quarterback needy team, I would draft one of those guys too. Mid or late. I'd also keep 4 on the roster, but you know my thoughts.
How old is Stetson Bennett?
25.
25.
You think Bryce Young's size is an issue?
Stetson Bennett is bigger than Bryce Young. Did you see them standing next to each other?
Yeah, I know.
That's the concern.
But he's still small.
Yeah.
And 25.
Yes. And also, didn't he blow off the Senior Bowl, get drunk or something?
Yeah, there's a lot of red flags have popped up on Stetson Bennett, who's a college football legend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
That's one of the most damning pictures I've ever seen in terms of Bryce Young's size. That Stetson Bennett, who's listed, I think, at 5'11", 190, is both taller and bigger than Bryce Young. Which means if you're taking that as read, Bryce Young can't be any bigger than 5'10" and like 180.
Basically every show it's like, did you see the most recent thing that shows how short Bryce Young is?
It's so funny, though, because he's about to roll into Indy for the combine that we're going to, and like off the back of chugging 7 gallons of water, weigh in at like 201, and then do nothing. No form of moving around whatsoever, lest he betray the fact that he just threw on 25 pounds of garbage weight.
It's the only way to do it. What else we have here for the Saints? You have to replenish this roster through the draft.
Yeah. I mean, bottom of the first round, defensive line.
Yeah, who's the biggest, longest defensive lineman that's going to be available there? Because you're going to lose Davenport. I mean,
Yes.
Tyree Wilson would have been great if he's not going top
Like
5.
an ideal pick for them, sadly.
Yeah. There's some pretty good depth in the 40s on our draft board. You might be able to get somebody else in the second. Andre Carter could be interesting out of Army. I don't know if the NFL likes him as much as our draft board likes him at 24. A lot of people have Miles Murphy not going in the top 10 as they did initially. I think he would be a good late first, like a George Karlaftis type.
What about
Murphy's
your,
a power winner.
Your guy, Keon White.
Keon White could be good. I'm up and down on him. I know the model likes him and everything.
But you're up and down on him.
A little up and down. I'm trying. There's context around it. Former tight end. A lot of his production came at Old Dominion. Wasn't as productive at Georgia Tech. I'd take Keon though. Prefer him in the second. I'm surprised. I'm actually surprised that the NFL likes him that high.
I mean,
If that's the truth.
6'5", 286.
Yeah.
Is part of it.
He's a power rusher like a Miles Murphy. I would take either of those guys in the late first. I think that's fine.
All right.
But like it just feels like we're okay. Now you're replacing Marcus Davenport. You know what I mean? Like this is where the
But
Saints
that's what they have to
roster
do
is.
every year. Like
Yeah.
they hemorrhage players, they let guys walk, they cut guys for cap casualty, and then their entire offseason is about just replacing what they sent away.
It's not a look. Their 2017 draft is one of the best in NFL history. Ryan Ramczyk at tackle, and Alvin Kamara, and Trey Hendrickson, Marcus Williams, and some of those guys are gone. The Saints need something like that if they're to get back on track. And I think you get something like that by drafting 10 to 12 times and, just hitting on some picks, trying to rolling the dice a little bit more. That's the strategy in New Orleans
Walt says
while you're trying to figure out a QB.
Walt says not to worry about Stetson Bennett because Roger Staubach was 27 when he came into the NFL.
Oh, there we go.
I'm always
Fine.
looking for precedent from the Dark Ages.
If Staubach did it, what's going on? I got to re-log into every single app right now. Everything's falling apart here, tech wise. How did anybody talk about football? How did people podcast back in the 80s when they didn't have depth charts online?
Back in the 80s.
Yeah. How did they do it?
I don't think they did in the 80s, to be honest.
Were there no podcasts there?
No. So what about free agency? Because the Saints are always spenders in free agency just to replenish the guys that they let walk to free agency in the first place.
I mean, the same guys that I'm trying to give everybody else are all former Saints. Sheldon Rankins
But
and
they
David Onyemata.
like they let Marcus Williams leave, and then they bring in Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu. Like they've this weird ability to just juggle quite high-priced players.
I know. But they have to look maybe the cheaper defensive lineman, the not Marcus Davenports. I mean, Obo Okoronkwo, I would like for everybody. Brandon Graham on a 1 year.
Feels like he might retire.
You think so?
Yeah. I don't think he's going anywhere else. Like he's either
Eagle for life.
Yeah, one last go around with Seattle or bye-bye.
Justin Houston keeps popping up with teams on 1 year at
I
a
wonder
time,
if
playing pretty well.
they'd be the team to take a swing on the 1 year Jadeveon Clowney deal.
Oh, I would like that. Yeah, I like Clowney.
I mean,
I would sign Clowney. My team would have Clowney every year on a 1 year deal, and John Ross every year on a 1 year deal.
but it's becoming, I think, more and more clear why Clowney keeps only getting 1 year deals as opposed to ever getting the big one. Like he appears to be a pain in the ass as well as,
Where do we have him in our free agent rate? The last
31.
3 years right now. So right now he's 31, but the last 3 years he's been between like 22 and 31 or whatever in our free agent rankings. Signs the 1 year.
I mean,
deal.
the smarter money feels like you might be the team to bring in Charles Omenihu, who he's been really productive and is coming off a career year. That's actually a future-looking move as opposed to short-term 1 year type of stuff.
Yeah, I like that deal too. I like that potentially. So second class free agents, maybe not the right way to say it, but the
Arden Key
in the
is another
30s
guy.
to 50s in our free agent board,
Yeah.
bringing a couple of those guys up front.
Arden Key has been pretty productive. His 15 essentially percent pressure rate over the last couple of seasons is a top 20 figure amongst edge rushers. He started off as like this hyper undersized from a skinny point of view, just lightweight edge rusher, and then has packed on some size and is actually a pretty productive pass rusher now as a rotational guy.
We're mentioning all these defensive linemen because free agents include Marcus Davenport, who we've said, David Onyemata, also Contavious Street and Shai Tuttle, all potentially
And
gone here. Brought back Tano Passignon now.
And Cameron Jordan is just getting
And
old.
Cameron Jordan's getting old. And Peyton Turner, 2021 first rounder, showed flashes at times, but been inconsistent. But you're going to need a lot more from Peyton Turner. This is where they are as a roster. You need Peyton Turner to play like a first-round pick. You need these guys that you drafted as replacements to play better.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is if you're going to put all your eggs in one basket draft-wise, those guys need to be good, high. Like if you're trading a ton to get back into the thing and go for Chris Olave, it only works if Chris Olave is amazing. Now he looks like he's good, but the same thing applies to Trevor Penning and to Peyton Turner, like to your first-round picks, to Marcus Davenport when you traded 2 first-round picks to get him. If he's not incredible, it's not good.
All right, do we fix the Saints?
Yeah, as much as we can.
You'd play in the Carr sandbox, though?
They're the team that makes the most sense to me for Derek Carr.
Okay.
Because I think for no other reason than they're the team whose ambitions at quarterback are probably the lowest and are therefore happy to settle for Carr. Like, to me, the Jets should be aiming higher than Derek Carr. Derek Carr absolutely makes the Jets better, but given where they are as a roster and everything else, they should be aiming higher than Derek Carr.
That's what I mean. Like, I'm more likely to go the Derek Carr route if I'm in the NFC South.
Right.
Or if I'm a team like Washington that doesn't have a clear path to a replacement as a quarterback.
Whereas the Saints, you're like, no, this is about right.
All right. Fix the Saints. Last team, the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Oh, man.
What do we do with the Bucks?
Well, we're fine because they're starting Kyle Trask, remember?
Kyle Trask is on the roster.
He is.
He's the starter.
Is he top of the depth chart? Is he past Blaine Gabbert?
Blaine Gabbert's a free agent. Kyle Trask is the only one remaining.
Does the job for him.
Julio Jones, a free agent. Scotty Miller, a free agent. I don't see, definitely don't see Julio coming back at this point. Levante David, is he a free agent?
Yep.
Yeah, right. Levante David, Jamel Dean at corner.
A lot of free agents.
Those are your biggest names. And then, like, a lot of the guys that they brought, like the Logan Ryans of the world that they brought in, the Keanu Neals that they brought in as veterans trying to make a Super Bowl run, those guys are going. Sean Murphy bunting. So they need a lot of help in the secondary. Mike Edwards, 3/5 of their starting defensive backfield are all free agents.
They were a team that Brad highlighted as losing, I think, the most to free agency this year.
Yeah.
Both
and that includes Brady. I mean, he retired.
From a snaps and, war point of view, like actual impact of these guys.
So, do you blow this whole thing up if you're the Bucs? Are you okay taking a poor season if needed and just starting from scratch here?
Yeah, they're another team that I think that's a question, at least from the outside, still to be answered. Like, what is our approach now? We went all in, comparatively speaking, for the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. We got one, so it was justified. And now Brady's gone. The reason for this whole thing existing the way it is no longer there. So the natural response is to let's blow it up and start properly again. Alternatively, I think it's very easy for these teams to look at a sort of post-Brady landscape or a post-Drew Brees landscape or whoever the quarterback is that's going and say, hey, this team's still good. Like, we just need an okay quarterback and we can still do some things, particularly in this division. Like, you almost forget that the only reason you built this team in the first place was so that the all-pro Hall of Fame quarterback could take them to a Super Bowl. And you sort of forget that the whole premise was that an average quarterback can't do that anymore. Like, we already had Jameis and he wasn't capable of doing that, so we went and got Tom Brady. Now you get rid of Tom Brady, or he gets rid of himself by retiring, and you're sort of tempted looking at the rest of the team to go, I mean, maybe a guy like Jameis could do it. Like, no, he can't. You proved that. That's why you did the Brady thing in the first place. So I think logically, you tear it down. But I also think it's very tempting for NFL teams to look at the roster and convince themselves that, yeah, you don't need a Hall of Famer.
I think that was well said, right? I mean, they were a good team with a pretty good team with an average quarterback in Jameis. Add Brady to the mix, and you're winning a Super Bowl. And now you're back to, you've got less on the roster now than you did even when Brady was there. The tempting part is you still have the big names, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Evans is, up over 30 years old now. Carlton Davis is a nice piece at corner. But there's just a lot of holes. There's a lot of holes. And we've talked Derek Carr for a lot of these different teams. Have they been mentioned in the Carr?
They were one of Peter King's not interested bucket.
So if they're not interested in Derek Carr, who would they be? Are they interested in Jimmy Garoppolo? Are they, because they feel the Bucs feel like a team that's just going to land on Jacoby Brissett as their starter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're at 19 in the draft.
So that's not first-round quarterback territory.
Yeah, unless like last year we made this massive assumption. We have teams, everybody drafts quarterbacks in the first round. We were talking about Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett. We were talking about all these guys going in the first round. Unless Levis is really a, mid first rounder, or Anthony Richardson is still available, right? Unless those guys just aren't as high as we're talking about,
but I think
then maybe they're in that.
I think we feel better about these quarterbacks than last year.
We do.
Like last year, we were talking ourselves into the idea that in this current landscape of toolsy quarterbacks working out and the floor that a rushing threat brings, the gamble of Malik Willis is worth taking a flyer with in the first round. Like, he's got a huge arm and he's an incredible runner. You can build something around that guy that's worth taking a gamble in the first round, because that's when quarterbacks go. If you have anything, you go in the first round. And then Kenny Pickett, it's like, all right, fine. If you have to take a quarterback, I guess Kenny Pickett is the best composite to take in the first round. But we didn't love either guy. Like, I remember very distinctly hearing from a bunch of people, like actual NFL people in the work in NFL buildings, saying, I don't like any of these guys. I don't think any of them work out. If I had to take one, it would be Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
That's not what you're hearing about this group, which is there's a lot to like, but there's some concerns, for each one of them. So obviously, like, Bryce Young's tape's amazing, but he's tiny. C.J. Stroud's tape against Georgia was amazing. The rest, not so much. Will Levis, incredible arm, prototypical size, bad last season, a lot of inconsistencies. And then Richardson, just the chaotic madness of his incredible tools, incredible plays, but wildly inconsistent tape. Like, that is a very big difference, I think, from last year's group of quarterbacks. Now, the point you're making can still be valid, that we're talking about all four of them going in the top 10. Maybe I've seen a mock with each one of the four going number one. I've also seen people say Will Levis isn't the first round quarterback. Like, it can be true that they're a better group than last year, and yet collectively the league thinks Will Levis or whoever is going to slide a bit. But if that's the case, does it feel like you're getting like a consolation prize and you're taking a gamble on a guy that isn't worth the gamble at that point? Like, are you sliding because teams think he stinks? Do you want to be the team to say, no, actually, he's the guy?
I mean, that's where Pickett went last year, right?
Yeah.
That range.
But they at least had the choice of all quarterbacks. Like, they were
True.
like, we need a quarterback, and we're taking the one guy we
Not
think
the
is
fourth.
good. Yeah. It's like, do you want to be the guy who drafts the one quarterback that everybody else thinks isn't capable of being a quarterback?
Yeah. I mean, I'm inclined to play the rebuild game here. There's so many holes to patch in free agency, and just get younger. So how did the Bucs win a Super Bowl? Obviously, Brady's the biggest factor, and they're playmakers and all that stuff. But they also did a really good job a couple years prior to in drafting Carlton Davis and drafting Jamel Dean, getting young in the secondary, and then very specifically that year, Tristan Wirfs at right tackle, Antoine Winfield at safety. It was Brady plus hitting on some picks and youth in some key areas. I think you just go back to this youth in key areas, right? You're going to replace Jamel Dean with the next young corner, right? Maybe a corner could be a great spot to draft at 19. Draft, get younger, replenish draft picks, draft 12 times, bridge quarterback.
Jimmy G.
Or
Tannehill.
Tannehill would be interesting.
See, I think there's enough.
I could see Tannehill doing some damage. So this is what I'm saying with the South, though. Because, like, the South is going to be, like, Derek Carr and Ryan Tannehill, and like, they're going to be battling for the division here.
Yeah.
So you could sneak a division win here while you're rebuilding.
I think there's enough about this. Well, the division is weak enough, and there's enough about this team, even with the kind of problems that they put themselves in. This feels like, I don't know that you need to quite go full rebuild. You can kind of hedge and try and do it concurrently with competing. What is those? Who was it that coined the term competitive rebuild? Was that the Vikings, or who was talking about a competitive rebuild as the concept that they were going forward with last year or the year before? That feels like what what Tampa Bay could actually do. Say, bring in a Jimmy G or Ryan Tannehill or even like an Andy Dalton like just somebody that's going to be fine at quarterback. Try and patch this thing up as much as possible this offseason with some low-price free agents, and then look to get younger with our draft picks. Bring in a cornerback replacement. I think they could probably do that without completely tearing the thing down and blowing it all up again.
Competitive rebuild, huh?
Yeah, I forget who it was that was using that as their term for a while, but that
feels like Seattle. Feels like a Seattle thing.
That feels like the approach that Tampa Bay could take as opposed to complete tear down.
Seattle kind of did it this year.
Yeah.
Right? They were competitive in a rebuilding season because they hit on a bunch of draft picks. They hit on several starters, and Geno Smith broke out. Now that's not a pattern to follow. That's like hit on your picks.
Right. And the quarterback. Like, that's the problem. I mean,
yeah.
Unless you find a quarterback that can give you top 10 play like Geno did out of nowhere, that's quite difficult.
Who would we talked about as the other? Like, could Gardner Minshew be the next breakout quarterback? Like, who's that next guy that it could be? You said P.J. Walker could be that 1 week.
Well, he was for a week.
For a week.
Yeah.
Is that somebody that these teams should be taking swings at? I always use Minshew because it's tough for me to separate the fact that he looked good in Jacksonville when he shouldn't have. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've just spent 10 hours basically breaking down every team in the NFL, and all we kept saying was supporting cast, build the supporting cast. Gardner Minshew had decent seasons without a good supporting cast, elevating people. I would just keep taking swings on Gardner Minshew types while you're figuring this out. I don't know if I want Garoppolo or not in Tampa Bay. I don't know. I'd be okay losing for a year.
Yeah, I wonder how much credit in the bank the institution has having won the Super Bowl. Like, presumably Jason Light is set for a while.
Todd Bowles won't.
That's the thing. Doesn't it feel like Bowles is like the fall guy after a crappy year?
Yes, of course. I mean, they went from incredible 2 seasons, Brady, Arians, and all that stuff. It's like, depends on how, Tom Brady just kind of got old and everything fell apart and his marriage and all that stuff. Or you could say, Tom Brady was unbelievable until Todd Bowles showed up. Depends on how you want to how you want to couch that.
Yeah, so it feels like Bowles
was he's still too conservative, trusts his defense too much. I mean, there's definitely some stuff head coaching wise that he was not good at last year.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, there was all that talk that Bruce Arians was essentially stepping aside to give him a gift-wrapped great situation so that this didn't happen to him. So that Bowles was actually given credit for doing a good job at head coach as opposed to being the fall guy for the Jets the first time around. And then I like the whole thing on spools, and now he's going to be the fall guy anyway.
I would lean toward non-competitive rebuild, but if we go competitive rebuild, I get it. It just feels like this might be. I think the best fit for Jacoby Brissett is Arizona, but this feels like a place where Jacoby Brissett or Andy Dalton might end up. Teddy Bridgewater.
I don't think I'm starting Jacoby for a full season.
But one of those guys is going to be a starting quarterback next year, I think.
Maybe.
Because I don't know. Maybe there's enough
they
jobs.
Shouldn't have been
maybe there's enough jobs to go around.
If you think about it, they shouldn't have been this year until injuries struck, or injuries and suspension. In theory, Jacoby Brissett isn't the starter for the Browns. In theory, Andy Dalton wasn't the starter for the Saints until Jameis got hurt.
Yeah, I understand, but there's other quarterbacks who have left the league,
but
Brady.
There's also others that have come into the league. We're about to get 4 first-round quarterbacks, likely.
I understand.
So I'm not sure there's a space to start for any of those guys.
We need to do a full QB carousel show and figure out where everybody lands. The rest of I think if they don't draft a quarterback in the first round, I think corner absolutely in play here, not only because of Jamel Dean, but Sean Murphy-Bunting. They could be in the Brian Branch area at 19 at safety. They could use more on the defensive line as well. Akeem Hicks, William Golston, Raheem Nunez-Roches. A lot of interior defensive linemen moving on here. It's just Vita Vea and Logan Hall who are left. So even edge rush, Shaquille Barrett coming off of his injury. But opposite him, they did bring in Joe Shoyinka in the first round 2 years ago. He was okay last year. They need depth there on the defensive line. You're seeing the pattern here. Mm-hmm. They need a lot of defensive linemen. They need a lot of help in the secondary. They need a quarterback. Receiver looks okay on paper with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Russell Gage. Playmaker and offensive line looks fine for now. But there's a lot of needs here in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
It's going to be a defense-heavy draft here. And They don't have the draft capital to make splash plays in free agency. It doesn't matter. They don't want to. Second wave of free agency to bring in some depth.
They're in a similar area to the Saints in terms of terrible cap situation, but they free up quite a lot, albeit by jettisoning half the roster.
Yeah, and you could free some up. Like Brady's going to be $35 million in dead money. So that was why I always brought up Mike Evans as the trade candidate, even though it doesn't make sense financially. That's just suggesting.
Well, that's like prototypical rebuild stuff, right?
It's prototypical rebuild stuff. You're gonna sit on $21 million of dead money, but you're gonna bring in a bunch of draft picks, right?
It's gonna be painful, but it's for next year.
Yeah, I don't think that happens. Like I've brought that up a bunch just because the reason why it would make sense is because the NFL wants that, right? There are enough teams around the league that want a Mike Evans, maybe higher than ever because of Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams and all those trades last year, A.J. Brown. So if T. Higgins isn't available and DeAndre Hopkins' price is too high, you're sitting on this Mike Evans asset that is incredible because he's still a really good player at a reasonable price. So that's why I brought it up as a possibility. I don't think Tampa Bay goes that route, though.
No, I think competitive rebuild is going to be their approach, which to me means some kind of bridge /
Teddy Bridgewater.
Like capable starting quarterback, and then try and do what they can with the rest of the roster.
What do you think the market looks like? Because Jimmy Garoppolo thinks he's going to make, 25, 30 million. I don't see Tampa Bay spending that kind of money.
I mean, that's not expensive these days. Like if Derek Carr is pushing 40, was coming off 40, and is presumably looking to get back in that range again.
I know it's not expensive, but you have $35 million locked up in Brady. Like if you pay Garoppolo $25 million, you're at $60 million for a quarterback, like for your quarterback position, not including Kyle Trask. I mean, is there a chance that they just roll with Kyle Trask? If you were going to play, like I would play the Caleb Williams game here, but again, teams don't rebuild, they don't tank.
Yeah, I mean,
my friends here.
I don't think they're
data science guys.
I don't think they're rolling with Trask. I think even if that's the approach, they're like, we're not spending $25 million on a quarterback, then they're going to find some other cheap ass option, like a Gardner Minshew. Like, what would he cost to be your starter? Probably a fraction of $25 million.
Yeah, I'd bring in Minshew.
Yeah. So like if they're doing something like that, that's the approach they're doing, rather than, hey, let's see what Kyle Trask has this year.
Big fan of Gardner Minshew. All right, did we fix the Bucs or just give them a whole bunch of different things to do?
Whatever.
Tough to fix. 15 minutes,
Yeah.
5 minutes. I don't know about you, but I'm tapped out.
Uh-huh.
All 32 teams. We fixed them all. 4 straight shows. Appreciate everybody for being there with us through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So this week, let's just reset really quick what's happening here. We're going to Indianapolis today. Today's Monday. We're going to be there the entire week. This is where we get to meet with our NFL team clients on that side, and then just be a part of Radio Row, Media Row over in Indy, players, interviews, and the whole deal. So you do have some big name interviews happening, potentially, until they back out on us.
Yeah.
Let us know if there's any other people you want us to talk to. We're going to try to get some great draft discussion going in the coming weeks with some of the draft analysts around the landscape here. So a lot of exciting times here as we head into the offseason, free agency, and the draft. Combine is always a great time for a lot of news and rumors and all sorts of fun stuff. So looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. Should be fun.
And of course, I'll be at Sloan this weekend on the analytics panel, or the football panel with Thomas Dimitroff, Kevin Demoff, president of the Rams, Jackie Davidson, she's in the front office with the Bucs. Maybe I can get some specifics from Jackie about where they're going to go quarterback-wise. And Seth Walder from ESPN moderating. So that'll be this weekend, the Sloan Analytics panel.
So you're like you're an expert rather than a host or anything like that.
Oh yeah, I'm the expert. They're going to ask me questions.
Wow.
And I'll just be like, I don't know. Thomas, you've done this. You tell me.
Just tell them all about the model.
No, I'm going to show some people maybe this weekend. If you just drafted with me the last few years, think about how much better you would be.
You could get the laptop hooked up to the big screen and be like, well, if you just refer to the model page here for a moment, you'll be able to see.
Show you my PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I got some slides.
Or just your giant spreadsheet.
Got some slides.
Yeah.
Are you interested in winning 2 more games per season? Because I can help you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're into that, or if you're an NFL owner and you listen to us, I can help you win 2 more games per season.
Is this recorded in a way that doesn't cost you hundreds of dollars to view, or how does this work?
It'll be on YouTube at some point.
Okay.
For free.
For
I
free?
believe. Yeah. But yeah, it's all sold out. It's all sold out there.
Mm-hmm.
But looking forward to seeing people there if you're there. It's long. Come say hello. We got a little booth there for PFF. A bunch of us will be in town. Get to sleep at my mom's house at night.
Just you, right? Not like everybody.
Just me. I did not invite everybody to my parents' house. But it's gonna be good. Back in Boston for a few days. All right, that's it. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again. I don't know. You got something planned for tomorrow, right?
At some point.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
See you tomorrow, probably. Not me though, Sam. Thanks.